and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein and friends, meaning all of you. You're all my friends. This is not just another episode, though, because we are taking on the topic du jour. It feels like a big topic. My guest and I were just a moment ago discussing our mutual experience of going through all the Reddit threads and the articles and the episodes and just how overwhelming it all feels. I am, of course, talking about this season of The Real Housewives of Orange County, which in my mind is very much the Rashomon season of Real Housewives of Orange County. For those of you who don't know, Rashomon is a classic film by the legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa that is all about the subjective nature of truth and the true nature of truth. And it is a movie in which we get several subjective accounts of the same experience, all of them different accounts based on the perspective of the truth teller. And like I said, it leads to this question of what is truth anyway? And I do feel like we are watching the Rashomon of reality TV seasons, of Orange County seasons. And at the center of it all is this truly, in my mind, mysterious, at times puzzling, at times confusing cast member named Katie Ginella. She's stirring up a whole lot of stuff. Intentionally, unintentionally, a combination of both. I guess we're here to explore that today and to hopefully break down with a little bit more clarity what we're watching play out on TV on a deeper energetic level, on a deeper thematic level, and hopefully maybe getting to the root of what this might be reflecting in us and the collective and all that good stuff. So, without any further ado, I couldn't think of anyone more perfect to join me on this ride than very trusted friend of the podcast. She's been here before. She'll be here again. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to vocal coach, singer-songwriter, tarot enthusiast who is here with her cards today to perhaps help us navigate this very complex, layered, and nuanced conversation, Molly Durand. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
How are you today?
So excited. I'm curious. I'm very curious to see what's going to unravel. Because I never know when I do these conversations with you. I kind of can't come into it with too much preemptive energy because it's always a discovery. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's kind of like a performance, right? You do your homework and then you throw it all out the window because you just got to wait and see what happens in the space.
Exactly.
I have done a lot of homework, though, you guys. I've done a lot of rewatching, a lot of internet sleuthing, exploring my thoughts in ChatGPT. So we'll see where this wants to go. We'll see how this wants to start. I'm actually going to maybe just sort of check in with you in a second. But yeah, there's just so much here. And I'm hoping we're even going to be able to maybe go back a bit retroactively and cover some of last season because that feels like such a huge part of what we're watching play out right now. Those of you who watch the show may recall, like Katie came in hot towards Heather way back when, and that kind of set off a chain reaction of events of conflict with Gina and then conflict with Emily, and then that sort of led to the season. So there's just so many different threads here between roofie rumors and paparazzi rumors and babysitter rumors. There's a lot to dismantle. So I guess having said that, Molly, I'm curious, as someone who's also been sitting with all of this and knowing we were coming into this episode, where are you first drawn to? What's grabbing your immediate attention in the world of Katie Ginella and how she's orienting towards this cast and what it's bringing up in the cast. And I guess also, I just always like to mention this. We're recording this. What's today's date? So the last episode was the final New Orleans episode where Gina had called this journalist, gotten quote unquote confirmation that Katie had repeated this roofie rumor. We have Gretchen on camera at one point saying she did have to go to the hospital, then saying she never went to the hospital. Then we have Katie at the end with Matt having a kind of cryptically worded conversation where they're basically acknowledging, yes, Gretchen did say this. Yes, Jen witnessed it. Yes, Slade called Matt saying you got to like hold the line and protect Gretchen. So this is where we are in terms of today's recording. Presumably by the time this is released, we'll have seen the lie detector episode, which has not been released yet. So having set that up, yeah, Molly, I'm just curious, where is your immediate attention drawn to in all of this? And then we'll just use that as the launching off point.
I guess it's still like lingering between the last reunion with Katie, which I actually felt compassion for her. I guess what always is drawn to me, I like Katie, which is so confusing because she is somebody who I think is like just a likable person, but then nothing's adding up. So I think the thing that I'm most drawn to, just given a little bit of history, like what she told us about her past and where she is now, is I do think she's a survivor. Unfortunately, I think she has changed her worldview based off of what happened to her. And I feel drawn to the victim becoming a part of the game, feeling that they need to play a game to survive because they've been a victim in the past and they're not going to be a victim again. There's lots of different ways when you are an actual victim in life, right? And assuming she is, I do believe that she might have been, right? So if she truly was, and I like to take people on their word on that, and we all are in our own head, even when we're not, you know what I mean? Like we all are at some point, right? So there's different paths to take for that. You can heal that, and you can choose to not act as how you were victimized, not act as the person. You end up, a lot of times when you're victimized, you end up acting like the person who abused you. Unfortunately, it's sort of like a natural progression, and it's very difficult, even with a lot of work, to overcome that. So I think there's like a path where you choose to heal and authenticate, or you choose to heal to the best of your ability. And then you say, oh, this is how the world works. I'm going to play the game. And so that's kind of what I'm drawn to in her, is I'm actually really curious about what drives her in general. I think her relationship to her husband is a little precarious. And I think that they have like one of those like relationships with like a pact and an understanding that's, like you said a second ago, it was cryptic. And that the way that they were looking at each other to me represented like, oh, we have a pact. So that's sort of what I'm drawn to initially.
Now, just for clarity, when you talk about her previous victimization, are you talking about in terms of her first marriage, or are we talking about childhood stuff that I'm maybe not remembering her talking about?
First marriage, and I guess she just sort of was so young and everything that happened. And so it's a little unclear, but it definitely seems like she's a survivor. And at some point, it seems that she has decided to be a part of the game that she decided is a game that is unfair and not. What the cards are saying, too, is very specific, but I'll wait for that.
Okay. I want to say just first and foremost, I agree with you. I've also gotten the very specific hit of her being a survivor. Let me just preface this by saying last season, Katie was one of the few reality TV cast members where I literally did not know what to make of her. I could not make heads or tails of her. I found her to be so confusing energetically. Kind of like what you're saying. There was a lot I liked about her, and I really wanted to like her. And let me also be clear, just because she's very polarizing in the viewing audience, and there are people who fucking love her, and there are people who don't. I don't actually have passionate feelings either way about her. I'm talking as a human being, as a viewer. I don't hate her, nor do I love her. I just find her at this point intriguing in terms of what she's bringing up on the show. But yeah, last season, I really found myself wanting to like her because there was so much that was compelling about her. Obviously, very intelligent, beautiful, really interesting backstory with her birth story and her origin story. So there was a lot that I was like, oh, this is like a dynamic, for lack of a better word, character on the show. But yeah, just didn't really know what to make of her because 95% of what we saw on the show was constantly revolving around these she said arguments where it's one person has one version of the story and then another person has another version of the story. It's all happening off camera. And I just didn't know how to make heads or tails of it, right? So having said that, coming into this season early on, when she talked about getting custody, I believe, or I don't know if she got custody, but one of her 4 children finally decided to move back in with her in California, I think, as opposed to being in Atlanta with the dad. And, she was talking about kind of assembling the family back together. And when she was talking about that, I got the exact same hit you did. I was like, oh, she's a survivor. Like, she's been playing a long game with this. And I could feel, even though we don't know the specifics of what happened, again, everything related to Katie always feels a little energetically vague and murky to me. I could feel the deeper impression of her arc, which is I lost something. It was devastating to me. I've been driven to get it back. Now I'm hearing the words at all costs, and I'm doing it. And so, yeah, I really felt that survivor scrappiness. That was the first time that I felt like I got a clear hit off her of like, oh, she's playing to win. And like you said, she's a survivor. And she's determined to survive and to come out on top at all costs. And kind of what I'm hearing now is like, correct the wrongs of the past, like the ways in which she feels like she's been wronged, or to your point, victimized. She wants to come out on top. So yeah, I agree with you. And I also want to say, yes, going back to last season, as I revisited last season in context of this season, I feel like she became so much clearer to me. Yeah, I'm so drawn to what you said about I'm going to play the game that essentially kind of beat me at one time. Which, just to bring it in, because I feel like there's no way to talk about her without talking about her relationship to race and being a Korean daughter in a white family in a Southern Catholic environment. I did listen to a podcast she did recently where she really talked about initially hating her Asian ethnicity because she did stand out, because she was made fun of. She specifically talked about how she sort of took pride in pretending like she didn't like rice because she didn't want any of the kind of like the stereotype of being Korean or Asian sort of attached to her. So that just sort of comes to me in terms of like this notion of like, I'm going to play the game. You know what I mean? So it's all interesting because when I revisited last season, and really revisited this storyline with Heather, which is interesting to go back to because, a lot of people are riding really hard for Katie right now. But it's interesting to remember that actually when she first came onto the scene last season and she was really going hard with that paparazzi thing, people were really annoyed by her. And I remember people like thought she was being thirsty. She was leveraging for camera time. So it's interesting to see the pendulum swing. It's also interesting to see the pendulum swing against Shannon this season, which is maybe a whole other conversation. But coming back to Katie and Heather, I was rewatching this storyline play out. And I think the first time we really catch wind of it is when Katie is having one of her first group scenes. They're at this bar. And what's interesting for context is Katie has already brought up this paparazzi thing, that she has proof that Heather did call the Paps, right? And that she's lying about not having called them. And apparently Gina told her off camera, do not bring this to the show. Do not bring this up on camera. Like Gina gave her that heads up. And yet Katie took it upon herself to start spreading that word on camera. And then there's this whole conversation about it at the bar where the women are kind of loving it. And I was looking at Katie and there was just there was this smile on her face, this kind of like cat that ate the canary expression. And it just immediately landed to me, Molly, as like, oh, this is currency for her within the group. This is power. That's what it felt like. Like I've got a secret. I've got information. This gives me currency in the group. And I think it's really important to note that this played out on the show. And, this is where we start getting into her lies, right? Because it's like Katie last season, and this is a big part of what I'm going to want to talk about with you, because I think she really hides her hand and kind of hides the intensity of her drive to win behind a kind of like, ah, shucks, it's silly, who me persona. But one of the things she says when she's sort of recounting the story, she's like, I don't know if she says I never watched. She specifically says, I didn't know you guys were even talking about this as part of what she said. So her claim from the beginning is that she doesn't apparently watch the show, because if she watched the show, she would know this was addressed on the show, right? So she's claiming she doesn't watch the show. She doesn't know that that the cast members were talking about Heather calling the paparazzi. She just happened to see a headline about this on TikTok. I guess she knows who Heather Dubrow is, even though she doesn't watch the show. And she took it upon herself at that point to call her friend who works in the paparazzi to find out whether or not called the paps or not. But did this all independent of this. She just did this out of her own curiosity as a random non-watcher of the Real Housewives of Orange County, which if you believe that, I've got a fucking bridge to sell you, right? So I think she clearly knew that this was conversation on the show. And I think that, yeah, my sense is kind of like, if I had to guess, knowing she's coming onto the show, it's like, oh, I've got an ace up my sleeve. I've got information I can find out. The women were talking about this. I think she's clocking at a certain level that Heather is a tricky spoke in the wheel for this cast, where I think they kind of love her, but they also resent her for her control and her power, right? So it's like, oh, I've got something that gives me currency and an in within this group. I'm not going to act like that's what I'm doing. I'm going to pretend this is all just kind of like a silly little game, but this is what I'm doing. There's a lot more I could say about this moving forward, but I just kind of want to maybe pause with just that headline of like Katie, because this also will sort of come back with the blogs and the rumors. I feel Katie as someone where knowledge is power and it's currency and it's an ace up your sleeve. And yeah, like a secret in your back pocket. Even just saying it, I can feel my body coming alive. There's something as Katie that just feels so powerful of like, I gotcha.
It's interesting that she wanted to expose Heather. You brought that up right after you brought up the being fraudulent. She wanted to expose Heather for being fraudulent. And you brought that up right after you talked about the podcast where she pretended to hate rice and decided to become fraudulent, which breaks my heart for her. Because Korean culture is like one of my favorite, like it's such a beautiful culture. So to be disowned from such a beautiful culture into like a white Christian culture just sucks, right? And like that my heart breaks for her. And she was obviously in an environment where she was ashamed, and my heart breaks for her that way. And so I could see how it would trigger her if she sees somebody being fraudulent, if she had to also be fraudulent. That's the first thing I noticed there. And because you said currency and lies, one of the cards, I asked different questions when I was pulling cards before we started. And one of them that kept coming up is the coins, the currency. And the moon flipped out backwards, or reversed next to the 8 of Pentacles. So like for her to work means in order to get currency, one has to play the game and they have to keep the secrets. She hasn't necessarily, according to like what I'm seeing here, she hasn't been able to heal the idea that in order to survive, you have to lie, because I do think that's what drives her. And I do think that she feels if she'll be left out if she doesn't get creative and play the game of manipulation. Because I think that she probably was. And that is what I get most from her.
Oh my God.
And I think somewhere along the line in her past, when she told the truth, she was shunned and cast away. At some point in her life, telling the truth got her in a lot of trouble. So she learned that she has to manifest a new version of the truth in order to get what she wants in life. Mm-hmm. That's my read on what you're saying. And I also, when you watch this season, they all lie. And I think what you brought up at the very top of the film that you brought up is actually the most important part, is that everybody, like you'll even see Jen and Gretchen scrambling a little bit because their desire is to take Tamra down because Tamra lies and does horrible shit, right? And is so unaccountable. I mean, it was wild to watch her talk to her therapist and be like, and then I just left. And, at first when she tells the story, she's like, they were yelling at me, so I left. And then later she's like, I mean, yeah, I raged out and all this stuff. And so it was fascinating to see how they all have to, whatever their motive is, which I think is survival. They want to survive on the show and it's all currency for all of them, right? And it's also not only currency, but like staying afloat in these shows, all of the housewife shows are about staying afloat within, keeping up with the Joneses within the group. So you have to be within this group idea of who's right and wrong, which shifts and changes every season. One season you're a hero, the next season you're a villain. It's going to happen to all of you. You'll all get your turn. But I think that in this particular season, it's very hard to tell where the truth lies in all of the women, to be honest. I don't know if one lie starts that, because we certainly, and isn't this funny how much of a mirror this is for what's going on in the world, politically and otherwise? Like if you have one big lie, it's very hard. It's like a ripple effect. It's sort of hard to decipher what's true and what's false. And now we're living in this alternate reality. And how do we find our way in an alternate reality?
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing so much, but I got something so deep when you were when you first started talking. I just want to like find my way back to it, because it was about this notion of power, because I am so drawn to the way in which I feel like Katie makes a play for power, but like I said, will always sort of hide it behind kind of like who, me? Oh, this was just silly. It was just Emily, no, it was just a silly moment between my daughter and me talking about your kids. Like, well, we didn't mean, like, you know, I mean, she even said at one point when she was in a fight with Gina, like, don't hate me, I'm weak. Like, she literally says, I'm weak. And which is all just to say,
to me, that's where, yeah.
Which is all just to say, what I see in Katie is someone who plays to win, but disowns that she's playing to win, doesn't want to let you see that she's playing to win. It reminds me of like, sorry, you guys are gonna have to bear with me. I'm trying to find the language to articulate this, but it reminds me of way back when in Beverly Hills, when Camille Grammer was in a confessional and she's talking about Kyle, and she basically says, the person who loses their cool, the person who keeps their cool wins. The person who loses their cool loses. Sorry, Kyle, I win, you lose. And, you know, I mean, we're going to get back. We'll get into this. I'm so drawn to this story that came out that I guess was addressed at the reunion, this like road rage story where Katie got into a road rage altercation with someone. The guy got arrested. I want to explore that on a deeper level, because that to me almost feels like the deeper, energetic pattern that's underneath all this. But it's someone who's like, because like when you're in a road rage fight with someone, or let's even just say like an internet fight with someone, or someone trying to get the last word, like what is that? It's just a drive to win for the sake of winning, and it's a drive for power. You know, it's like you're not trying to actually accomplish anything there. Like,
right.
You just want to win at all costs. And I think there's something though, especially like, you know, with the road rage version, that's the energy unhinged. That's the energy revealing itself and coming out to play in a really unexpectedly naked way. But like when you're in an internet argument, right? Like when you see people get into these like debates online, and there's sort of like everyone's just trying to get the last word. There's often this kind of like, I'm going to pretend like I'm not invested in winning this argument, even though I'm really invested in winning this argument. You know what I mean? Like you see people try to like, it's like no one can just walk away from the argument. Like each person has to have the last word. But then even within that, they don't want to, they'll point the finger at the other person being like, look at you. You can't even walk away from this argument. Well, look at you. You can't walk away from this argument. Well, I'll walk away once you walk away, but you're not walking. You know what I mean? It's like no one wants to admit how invested they are in this, because that's the vulnerability, right? It's like if you admit you care, like the charge reveals the depth of the vulnerability. So you don't want to acknowledge the charge. You want to win, but you don't want people to know that you care about winning. And I guess I'm just saying all this because two things. It's like when you were talking about her early experiences, I could just suddenly feel the possibility of like this young girl or this young woman who's like getting hurt by people, who's getting hurt by these insults, who's getting hurt by like a system that doesn't understand her or misunderstands her or seeks to misunderstand her. And I could almost feel the freeze of I'm not going to, even just saying these words, I feel I'm not going to show you how much this hurts. I'm not going to show you how much this makes me want to break down and cry. I'm not going to show you how powerless this makes me feel. I'm not going to give you that satisfaction. And it feels like this little girl who just fucking froze. And then it's like in the freeze, it's like I'm playing to win. And the other thing I want to say about this, and then I'll stop, is like, you mentioned wanting to expose the fraud in Heather, right? Because it's like she's got her own relationship to fraudulence. Part of what I felt in this was, yes, like, Heather is kind of like this queen bee. It's like, I want to poke at something in Heather that lives in me. Like, I'm going to expose Heather for the same kind of like control, behind the scenes machinations, power hungry need to control the narrative that I have myself. And in that, I'm going to feel more powerful. It's like you're saying, I'm going to play the game that beat me. I'm going to be the one who gets the last laugh on someone else. And not only that, but I really think her intention in a way was to corral the women, for them to kind of have her back in all of this. I actually think she sort of thought maybe the other women would run with it more. And then we'll get into that, because I think that really sets up what ended up happening over the course of the season with Gina and Emily. I think Katie kind of thought she was going to come in, pretend this was all kind of silly and dumb, plant the seeds, but it would expose Heather, gain her entry and currency in the group, and she would get this kind of like almost sort of sick, twisted satisfaction of like taking Heather down in the very place where she herself got wounded. Does all this make sense?
It does. When you're talking about her being frozen, also, like that regulation through conflict, right? So if she cannot identify, and I very much agree with the moment of her like getting hurt as a child, not knowing how to process that, and then just shutting down completely. Because there's many times where we're watching interact with the women, and the more calm she is, because I think she's in her head navigating how to make sense of it. The more calm she is, the more activated they get, the more emotional response that they project. I think is almost like if a person cannot find emotion within themselves, like get emotional, and they're not identified within their own emotional world, a lot of times they do like a form of emotional discharge or like projective identification, where they'll sort of provoke others to feel what they can't tolerate. And they have like a regulation through that conflict. Like then they can find the regulation, and they also get a little bit of relief when others react in a way that they actually can't. And you'll kind of see this happen, especially Shannon's like such a great person to just like incite. If you're looking for a reaction, like you can incite her so easily, right? And then you can easily point the finger at like they're crazy and reactive, which is, it's kind of funny because she's even getting Gina, and like she's gotten every single one of them to sort of what looks like to the audience, and why the audience is like rooting for Katie, is it does look like people are ganging up on Katie, because Katie stays calm and she's like, well, I just said the thing. I don't know what you guys are so upset about. I just said like the thing that might be the thing. And I don't know if it's the thing, but like, and then this thing happened and da 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 da. Like she's saying so many different things in such a calm demeanor and way, because she is frozen, because a long time ago she had to freeze, because she's living in an intellectual world where she thinks the game, if you think that the game around you is everybody's lying, which I think she does believe, in her world, from what I'm seeing here in the cards and everything, is that she learned a long time ago that you will be left out if you can't creatively manipulate on your own, and telling the truth gets you in trouble. So if you believe that, you detach from your body and you detach from your emotions, and you're just in a game. You're literally just playing a board game of like, okay, well, who can spin the lie? Who can spin the lie over here, and who can spin the lie over here? I did see her in one interview and her eyes were going to the left, and she was doing all the like natural indications of how to like, that would indicate that she might not be telling the truth. But in general, she's actually really good at telling a story that's really compelling and you want to believe her, especially in testimonials, the way that she does testimonials. Like, I want to believe her. So there's also that. I think that what's confusing to me is that I don't know where the truth exists in the show. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, because that's what's really hard for me.
Well, let's get there, because I mean, again, you just said a lot. So I want to like make sure we cover everything. But because I do think there's something Katie is representing in terms of the show. But let's bookmark that and come back to it. But yeah, I'm so glad you spoke to how she shows up in the face of conflict, because I agree with you. And what I notice is there's certain moments where I really do see this like look on her face. So one of them is last season when she and Gina got into it about Katie's like newest contention is that she felt set up by Gina, and Gina told her that basically she uses Heather Dubrow for her professional contacts. That was like a whole little conflict. And so Gina confronts her about that. Then there was another moment. Where was it? One of the moments was when Emily and Gina confront her at the top of this season when they meet for coffee in the season premiere, and Emily's like yelling at her about boundaries. And then I think another moment was at in the second episode when she brought them all to that lunch, and then like shit goes off there. So what I notice is like when energy starts getting really intense towards Katie, yeah, she freezes, right? Like I feel the freeze, which, oh my God, it just feels so historical to me. I mean, of course, but like I'm like feeling it in my heart right now, Molly. Just this like fight or flight. Well, I guess it's this fight or flight freeze. But then within that, it always looks like there's this like barely perceptible smile on her face. And yeah, and I read it two ways. One way is I think part of it is fear. Like, I think part of it is, again, like panic and nervousness. And it's sort of like, let me just freeze and kind of get through this. And yeah, kind of like what you're saying, I'm going to leave my body. You know, it reminds me a lot of like when Scandival happened and there was this TMZ interview with Rachel where she was kind of smiling and laughing and people were like, I can't believe she's smiling and laughing. And I watched it. I was like, oh, she's so scared and nervous. Like right now, that's what's going on. So I think that's part of what's going on. And at the same time, I also think part of it is look at what I can do. Like, I think she loves, this is part of how she experiences her power. You know, is provoking these reactions. And I want to say, and I think this is part of what you're saying. She's amazing at it. Like when I was rewatching these scenes, especially that lunch scene at that Korean restaurant, the way all the women started turning on each other, like there's this revelation about Katie. Suddenly, Gina and Shannon are fighting. Then like Gretchen and Tamra are fighting. And I was just sitting there like, it's like Katie just threw a rock into the middle of the pond and now like we're getting all these ripples and she is great. I mean, and that's what happens over and over. It's like Katie somehow instigates something. Then to your point and my point, she kind of freezes and energetically recedes into the background. And then there's just this like world of chaos around her. Now, I do think part of what Katie does, and this is sort of getting ahead of ourselves, but I just want to kind of plant the seed, is there is some sort of mirror she holds up, you know, to certainly these women. And, you know, let's just say to the collective, like there's something she does where it's like her lies force other people to almost confront like this shadow side of themselves. And I think that's part. You mentioned like, you know, how it sort of reads like she's getting ganged up on and now the audience is sort of really identifying with her. And I think part of it is because the women are getting triggered in places where they're getting caught. And I do think there are places where they're getting caught. And I'll sort of bookmark that. I'll bookmark that to like get deeper into it as we go on. But, you know, like any great liar, Katie's weaving things that have truth. You know, and she's calling things out. I mean, you know, it seems, I guess we don't know, it seems Gretchen was telling some tall tales behind the scenes to seed even more unrest about Tamra. That's getting called out now, you know, and so everyone's sort of scrambling, which, yes, to our point, is kind of like what Katie's been doing all along, right? So, but just to keep this big picture for now, and then I'll stop. What I keep sort of hearing and feeling as I was listening to you, and then as I'm hearing myself speak, is this notion, because you said she paid a price for telling the truth, which really resonates with me. And what I kind of feel layered on top of that Oof. Okay, sorry. I just even before I even said the words, I felt this in my heart. My heart, by the way, which previously felt frozen, my heart suddenly vibrated when I heard these words. Like, as Katie, I'm someone who wants to actually tell the truth. Like, I'm someone who wants to call out the lies. I want to call out the hypocrisy. So it's sort of like there's this urgent voice to want to call shit out, but then learning that she actually pays a price for doing so. And the last thing I'll just say, kind of just intuitively, like when I keep just sort of filling into her childhood, which I know almost nothing about, it is the way that I experience it, Molly, like what's coming through right now. It's this like this thick veil or wall of heavy silence. It's like I just experience it as this opaque wall where there is just a world of information happening behind the wall, but it's like we are not talking about it. We are not discussing it. We are not addressing it. It's almost like, again, knowing nothing about Katie's personal history, but if I just go with the few threads that I know, like if she were a young girl who wanted to speak up to, hey, like I'm a Korean immigrant having this weird experience in a white family, in a white world, in a Catholic world, and I want to call some of this out, like that there just would have been no room for it. And not just no room for it, like she would have gotten in trouble for it. Like, you ingrate, you this, you that, what are you talking about? We do all this for you. I don't know. This is just the flavor of what I'm getting. So I just want to say all that.
Yeah, when I pulled cards, I asked, what is her relationship to the truth? And one of the things, and what flew out was multiple cards. But what it led to is,
of course,
is that, telling the truth, 8 of Wands, led to the 3 of Swords, the Magician, and the Tower. So when you tell the truth, your world collapses, you lose power. So you must become the Magician. You must, because then pulled other cards for like, what do you want me to know about Katie? And there was a lot of energy around like feeling left out and having to creatively find ways to manipulate, and that, which I've said many times. And then, is she telling the truth on the show? It had a lot to do with currency. It had a lot to do with also finding her own way to find her currency in the world, identification. And this show, oddly enough, will be a way for her to heal her relationship as a woman and her relationship to the truth and how she's allowed to fit in society. I mean, when you're describing her childhood, it's like she's literally being colonized. And and it's also like, that sounds so like white people won't like that I say that, because they're like, well, I adopted her, this, that, and the other. But it's like, can you imagine from her perspective what that would be like how confusing that would be, like leading a life where who you are is not being in any way, shape, or form. You're told as a child to disown the mystery of who you are. And like, wouldn't you want to know about that? And now here she is on a show with all white cast, right? And yes, there's a part of her that wants to like break the ice of like what's actually going on here and what's causing all of the damage here. And like, I'm not the one causing damage. By poke a hole, and like to start with Heather is, to me, makes sense, right? Because Heather's sort of the epitome of keeping up with the Joneses energy, right? And like, oh, if she's the standard, because she felt left out by Heather initially.
Yes, exactly. I want to talk about that. Yes, exactly.
So if she feels left out, ridiculed, whatever happened to her as a child, or if she tells the truth, she's going to get in trouble. So I better learn the way to tell a lie so that I can stay in the mix and find my own currency, as you said many times. But I think for her, like the big picture of what she could get from all of this is actually just like, I think she's trying to find her identity. I think she's trying to figure out who she is in the world, not just as a Korean woman or as a, as a mother, but like, she was a mom so young. She now then remarried. She this, she that. She's just surviving. When you're just in survival mode your whole life, you don't have time to figure out who you are, what you like, what you're, watching this show, Dying for Sex. And it's not about sex so much as it's about finding out who you are and what you like. And I'm thinking of her. Like, does she know who she is? Does she know what she likes? Because I think I like her relationship with her husband, but it definitely feels like there's a set of rules in which I see a lot of love there, but I see a pact that was made that has to do with surviving in society in order to get ahead. And I think that she's missing out on a deeper opportunity here to actually find out who she is, what she likes, because I think that who she is and what she likes probably is maybe going back to this truth teller who got in trouble for telling the truth.
Yeah, well, that's what's so interesting. When you talked about like pulling cards about her relationship to the truth, and then you said the magician, like what immediately came to me was actually like, if like the truth could be her magic, if she were willing to wield it. And yeah, what I hear you saying is because the truth teller in her got driven underground, the magician has become a shadow magician who plays these games, in the shadows of the blogosphere or what have you.
That's perfect.
In order to manipulate her way into the group.
Can I speak to that really quickly? Because it's right next to the tower, because what you just said is actually dead on. You just nailed it. And it's coming right after this Three of Swords. So it's basically like that would be the access point for her to be liberated, but she'd have to be willing for the tower moment of society to crumble and to not care about what others think.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful. And there's a deep wound with this Three of Swords from the past. Can she do it? Can she find healing while being rejected by society?
Yeah, and to feel that heartbreak, and I think that powerlessness. And I think, I wanted to circle back around to what you said, because in terms of feeling snubbed by Heather, because that was a big part of the backstory. I mean, the timeline is so confusing, but part of the backstory leading up to coming onto the show was that Katie felt snubbed by Heather. And again, there's another she said stories all throughout Katie's, and like littered throughout Katie's wake. But one of them is like going to this Christmas party, and Heather either saw Katie, knew who Katie was, and turned her nose up at her, or Katie thought she did it. Either way, Katie experienced Heather as snubbing her. And that, I definitely clocked that. And that definitely felt like part of this wielding this information. I just really like heard this voice like, oh, you think you're going to snub me? Like, I'm going to get the last laugh. Like, I'm like, you're not getting away with this. Like, you are going to pay the price, which again, that's why, I really do want to come back to that road rage incident, but like, I come back to the flavor of like an internet, like war of words, like I'm getting the last word. I'm going to make you pay. And so, I think sort of like just to keep tracking that a bit, I think she sort of came in with this information in her pocket. And I think kind of what happened at that first, because that tennis event, right, last season is where she and Heather kind of finally had a confrontation. And I think Katie's experience of that, if I'm right about this, is kind of like, in a way, the player got played. Like, I think what happened when she revealed, I think kind of compulsively, that she had this information about Heather, even though Gina told her not to bring this up on camera, the other women rallied around it, because of course, like, this is perfect for the other women because, again, Katie's tapping into something real. There's a real push-pull relationship between this cast and Heather Dubrow, right? I think there is some genuine love and affection there for sure. And I also think they resent the hell out of her. And I think they have to kind of keep quiet about resenting the hell out of her because of the alliance of it all, right? And I think it's the same for Heather. I think Heather on a certain level knows they kind of resent her and they talk shit about her and they get shitty about her. And I think she turns a blind eye to a lot of it because, to your point, she wants to stay on the show. She wants to survive on the show. She wants her allies. So there's a kind of energetic gridlock with Heather and the other women. And I think that Katie kind of like, slung an arrow right into the bullseye of that gridlock. But I think what she didn't realize happened was the other women were kind of like, yes, Katie, we love it. We love you. Go do it. And I think Katie kind of felt like she was going to have their energetic support, not realizing, in a way, Katie was playing right into their hands because they get all the goodies, right? They get someone exposing Heather. They get Heather getting fucking taken down and knocked down a peg, finally, and they don't have to fucking do it. It's like Katie's the naive...
Same with Tamara now. Now she's doing it with Tamara.
Katie is the naive newbie. She is the lamb we are sending to the slaughter. You go, Katie. Good luck with that. You go and do it. We're going to watch from the sidelines. And it's kind of like what Katie's doing in terms of like poking Heather in the place where she wouldn't want to be poked. It's almost like not only do we get to see Heather get taken down, we also get the pleasure of watching you get eaten alive for it. So you're going to pay the price we don't want to pay. You're going to confirm why we're never the ones to do this. And we also get to see Heather taken down in the process. And so Katie goes and sort of like has her confrontation with Heather. She more or less does get eaten alive because, again, like Katie, you know, she's not willing to really dig her heels in and have like a strong, powerful position. And so I think Katie at that point had to take the L, right? She had to take the loss. Like her plan didn't work. She got steamrolled by Heather. She got left hung out to dry by the other woman. And I think that's where she then pivoted to Gina betrayed me. Gina abandoned me. And I'll pause here, but I do want to sort of get into that because that sort of leads to the second chapter of the season. But, you know, she goes to Gina and she's like, Gina, I just felt like you encouraged me to talk to her and then you didn't have my back. And Gina literally says to her, Katie, I told you, do not bring this up. And you didn't listen to me. So of course, if you're going to bring this up on camera, yes, you have to go and deal with it. And Gina says very clearly to her, I'm on Heather's side. I told you not to do this. And Katie's response is so funny. And this is how you know, like, she really does have a relationship to lying and deflection. She's like, well, it was just too far gone at that point. And Gina even says to her, it was too far gone because you brought it up. Like what Katie's saying makes no sense. It was not too far gone because some magical elf came around and like told the women, you know what I mean? Katie had this information. Katie brought it up. Like this was her own doing. And so it just speaks to a larger pattern of like, she sows these seeds. And then when it blows up in her face, she backs off and she's like, well, I didn't know. And hey, you didn't have my back. But I do think, I'll stop talking in a second, but I do think part of what motivated her to then go after Gina was, again, she's playing to win. And she just can't take the L. Jen Pedranti even told her in the middle of the season, she's like, Katie, just let this go. Like, let this go. Katie won't let it go. And I think that's why she started going towards Gina. But I'll pause there and just, see if this is bringing anything up.
I love what you're saying about Heather last season, because that's now she's doing it again with the collective, like knowing Tamara. Okay, so now Tamara is the thing that needs to be poked at. And so, but utilizing all these different characters on the chessboard, because for her, it's just a big chessboard. And that's why like she has no emotional response to any of it. And she'll just be like, oh, and then she'll navigate. And in her mind, she's like constantly navigating. Okay, where do I go now? Where do I go now? She's not emotionally connected to this, because I actually think like when you're talking about her being polarizing, like what drives us is often a polar. There's polarity in what drives us, because the ego wants to win, the soul wants to heal. And we oftentimes have the unconscious, the subconscious thing, two different things driving us. And I think, and I'm going to keep going back to this, I think this show is a big part of her karmic healing journey, because I just saw her in an interview. So now she's being uplifted by the audience, the online audience, and the people that were watching the show, ultimately, which is what she seeks, right? In an interview, she said she was asked not to go to Amsterdam by Bravo. And then she brought up how the online presence sees the truth. So her desire, the mantra that was like running her life, right? I want to be loved. I want to be seen for who I really, truly am, is what's being fed to her and allowing her to heal this part of herself. But it's not but it's all the magician, right? It's all self-created. If you self-create a conflict to try and heal the past within a resolution, within a manipulated conflict, similar to like creating a tariff and then getting a deal with the tariffs. Well, you created the tariff, you created the problem, and now you need to get a deal to come in. That's like master manipulation. And because like her worldview is that everybody lies, everybody manipulates, so I got to find my way in. That's not my worldview, right? But that's what I think Katie's worldview is. If you live in a world, and maybe she's right on the Housewives shows to feel this way. She is traversing in a very specific universe, and she's kind of saying like with the smile that you're talking about, fuck all these women and like all these people and the people who are running this show. I don't trust any of them. I'm not going to be authentic. I'm going to find my way in and find my currency through doing whatever I have to do to expose them. That's why I don't have an emotional response, because I'm not really in relation to any of these people in a real way.
Oh my God. Okay.
So that's sort of how I'm reading her. But I'm also like, there's a lot of people that operate in the world this way. And that's going back to the Three of Swords, because they're deeply hurt from a young age of being rejected and their ultimate truth was literally rejected and they were told that they don't belong. And if that's the world in which you were brought into, which a lot of us are, and you ultimately don't feel that you're going to be okay on your own and with your internal truth, then you have to bend the truth to fit in society.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're saying because you're kind of possibly answering questions I've had, all along, which is just, kind of like, what is her orientation towards the show? What's her orientation towards these women? But also, like, is it different from her orientation in life? And so I love this idea of Katie perhaps coming from a lifelong pattern of I view the world as kill or be killed, eat or be eaten. This is sort of what we do. So, of course, if I'm coming onto the show, this is how it operates. Because, again, that is kind of a bit of a part of reality TV, which I do think is part of the mirror that she's holding. I mean, again, we'll maybe save this for the very end, but I kind of feel like it's not lost on me that Katie is kind of almost the new, I think, more sophisticated, and I'll say why later, version of reality Von Teese, where it's like, this is the original flagship of the Real Housewives. It's Orange County, right? Like, this was the one that started it all. And now we've got this kind of mystery question mark character who's coming in, and if we're right about this, kind of holds up on some level wants to be the truth teller who calls things out and holds up a mirror to like shadow areas of ourselves. She's kind of saying, like, what has this show become? Like, this is just blowing up everyone's relationship to lies, alliances, bloggers, rumors, gossip. What are we watching? What are we participating in?
Yes.
But what I love, coming back to the personal for a moment with Katie, is that this is kind of what I'm hearing you say, or how I'm interpreting it. It's like she's been so lost in her version of reality, which is what happens to all of us, right? Like, a story gets written in our psyche. We accept the story as reality. We live according to the reality. And, our work as human beings, I think, on a soul reclamation or a soul remembrance level, is at some point along the way, we're going to wake up from our own matrix and realize, wait a second, what I've been accepting as reality is actually just my version of reality. And there's actually more available beyond my previous version of reality. And it's almost like what I hear you saying is the show this might be the first time that she's getting so much opposition and kind of outside feedback to make her stop in her tracks and say, oh shit. Maybe what I do, maybe my version of reality where it's like eat or be eaten, play to win, this is what everyone else is doing. Maybe that's not actually reality. Maybe there's something here for me to look at about how I orient towards life and relationships. And that could really be what you're talking about in terms of like the possible healing of like this show. I'm holding up a mirror to the show, but the show is also holding up a mirror to me. And maybe it is time for me to stop in my tracks and start thinking about like, why is my impulse to record someone when they don't know? Why is my impulse to run to bloggers and trade secrets as currency? And
I love that. And I think that when you're talking about the Shannon thing and recording Shannon, it goes to everything that we're talking about. It's the desire to say, see, these are the people that are supposedly normal in society. Look at how they act. Look, I'm going to expose the insanity that everybody says is okay and they get away with it. They get away with it, but I can't, which I kind of am hoping you're going to go towards the road rage story because it kind of bleeds into that. Like, I don't get to act like this, but they get away with it, but I don't get to get away with it. And so I want to expose their behavior because I didn't get away with mine.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the road rage story right now, actually, because you were talking about her kind of like emotional compartmentalization. And I'm drawn to that too, because, oh God, you guys, I guess just to recap this story, which was brought up at the reunion, this is all according to the police report. I mean, there's two different versions. Again, it's he said, she said. Katie's version, which to me makes zero sense, and in the words of Judge Judy, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true, is that she was sort of just driving along and this guy starts tailgating her, screaming at her, giving her the finger. First version of her story is she pulls over to the side of the road, presumably to let him pass. He gets out of his car and is recording her. And she claims was preventing her from leaving because when she would reverse, he would apparently run to the back of the car and block her. And then when she would try to pull ahead, he'd run to the head of the car and block her, which I'm just like, again, that right there, I'm like, that makes zero sense to me. No human being can sprint. Like if someone's behind you, you just pull up into the road and drive away. Like you can't tell me some guy ran in front of your car. So anyways, that's her story. And so then she calls the police, I guess, because she's like scared for her life. And the guy, what's interesting is the guy, they're both emotionally dysregulated. The guy actually ends up getting arrested just because he wouldn't obey the cops' orders. So anyways, this is the guy's version, which has been corroborated by the police. He saw her swerving in and out of traffic. He kind of caught up with her, saw she was texting while driving, saw that she had kids in the car. And apparently he had a relative who had recently been killed as a result of someone texting and driving. So in his emotional dysregulation, apparently he does, I don't know, I think he might yell at her to not text and drive. Maybe he gives her the finger. Then he goes off. Katie follows him home. Okay. She's actually the one who blocks him in his driveway. She's screaming at him. I forget exactly what she was screaming, but he was just like, it was nonsensical and she was crazy. So he starts filming her to capture it on film. She then calls the cops. And so this is where even more, like, I kind of love this because
she was afraid of the filming.
Well, and this is where like my sense of her as someone who likes to poke people in the place of the things that she does is, again, it's like a weird game. She starts saying, this guy won't let me leave.
Yep.
There were a few other things where she basically accuses him of the things she was doing to him. Now, the thing is, so then the cops come and she's like, oh my God, I'm scared. He won't let me leave. She complies with the cops because, of course, we know she knows how to stay calm when she needs to. He's outraged. He's just like, I won't get in my car. I won't do this. I won't do that. So they actually like subdue him and they actually like force him to the ground. I think he gets injured and then he gets arrested for obstructing police procedure, basically. Katie's watching all this happen. Finally, when he gets to the police station, he's like, look, can I explain this to you? And he shows them the video footage. And, the cops are basically like the evidence shows like his story is correct. I mean, just the fact, and then by the way, for anyone out there who wants to try to pretend like Katie doesn't lie, because I see this online where people are like, she doesn't lie. Like, what is she even lying about? In the reunion, when she first tells the story, she tells her version of the story where they're by the side of the road. Then it's mentioned like 30 seconds later that like in the police report, the police say she was at it comes up that like she was at his house, right? And Katie's response is, oh God. And this is how you know she's a habitual liar. This is what habitual liars do. Katie does this all the time, Molly. She says, what? His house? I never knew where he lived. And it's like,
oh yeah.
No, what? Like no one's saying you knew where he lived, Katie. Like you followed him home. That's how you got there. She does the same thing when she's denying to Tamara that she called the blogger. She's like, Tamara, I didn't call the blogger. I don't know her
so
first
dumb.
She's like, I don't know her first name. And it's like, what? Like, what are you talking? Like, no one accused you of knowing her first name. You don't need to know her first name to call her. Like, it's like she says these things to deflect from the truth. So anyways, Katie is like, I don't know where he lives. But 30 seconds later, it's mentioned that the police report confirms that she was outside his house and that the neighbors saw it. And then Katie at that point is like, oh, I didn't see any neighbors. But it's like, okay, so you're acknowledging you were at his house. So you were lying about being on the side of the road. But the point of what I'm saying, sorry, I'm just, guys, I hope this is interesting. I'm just laying it all out for anyone who doesn't know the details, just to like really show there really is not just a track record with kind of compulsively lying to avoid taking responsibility for what she's done, but I really want to like name that she followed him home. She blocked him in his driveway. She was screaming and yelling at him. Then she called the cops and she accused this guy of doing the very thing that she was doing. And the thing that's so like intriguing to me, coming back to the lack of emotion on the show and the calmness is, where is that Katie on the show? Clearly, she does have a relationship to this driving rage. And again, like what I'm calling this playing to win, she will win at all fucking costs. And I feel like what we're seeing her do on the show is a version of following that guy home. It's like Jen Pedranti, again, saying, Katie, let it go. Drop this thing with Heather. Drop this thing with Gina. Katie is not going to let it go. She's going to follow you home. But on the show, she's doing it in such a passive aggressive way. And then she never lets the mask slip to show that deeper emotion. And I'm just fascinated by that. I don't even know if I'm making a point about it, but I just want to bring it in. Yeah, I want to bring it in, Molly.
The story itself and the way in which it all went down, and the fact that she drove to his home because he basically judged her, gave her a look and shook his head.
And caught her. I want to come back to this, but caught her. That feels very...
Yes,
caught her.
Threatening to her. But my whole thing is trauma response, which is why I go back to this person as a survivor who, and when you say survivor, it doesn't mean that you're healed. It just means you had to survive something, right? And so I'm not going to speak to what she survived, but this is a trauma response. All of which I have actually, in my own trauma responsive, I have been a part of getting in that blind blackout sort of state where you have to defend, where you're not thinking logically at all in those moments. And then you snap out of it and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? And you have to take a minute. But like, she did not have that space in between her blind rage and getting to his house. In that moment, she's like, you're not going to judge me. You're not going to shame me. So what I get is she accused him of what she was doing because she felt victimized by his judgment of her. And that activated deep shame, and shame is a powerful thing inside of people. And the shame that she felt for being judged by him, she was not going to allow. It's not, you will not do this to me. So when she drives to his house, I think that's why he was a man. He was very much accusing her. This did not sit well with her because he was a man. Who do you think you are to tell me what I'm doing? I'm literally out of my body now in a full blind rage. Again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, where this is something that she's capable of that we don't see on the show because I don't think she has access to her emotions of how she really feels. And so when you don't have access to how you really feel, this is the sort of like the devil card, right? Like there's this sort of like your attachments are rooted within a pathology that is rooted in not enoughness. So like no light or power. Like you think of power, God, whatever you want to call it, of like source of like, I'll be okay no matter what. But if your attachment, which I think of as umbilical cord, is attached to your addictions, and addictions meaning rage, lying, survival techniques. I think of addiction as survival techniques. So if your umbilical cord is attached to survival techniques where you're like the sort of devil energy that I always think of is like you have nothing. So you have to constantly produce and you have to constantly overwork and you have to constantly manipulate because otherwise you'll have nothing and you'll die alone, right? So it's that sort of energy. So if you're sort of attached to that's how the world works, and now you have no access to how you really feel in the present moment in each given time, and you're detached from your emotional world, then rage is a response that will occur out of your control. And the shame that will come from having rage response that you have no control over is so terrifying. And that's why I go back to trauma response. She is terrified. And if she's terrified of herself, that she doesn't know when she's going to act out in rage, and she doesn't know how she truly feels, which is actually, this sounds very much like Tamara to me. This is very much how Tamara operates. Tamara is traumatized. She is terrified. And so she goes into rage, or she goes into detachment, or whatever it is. So that's sort of how I see her here with this. And all I have to say about it is that this is a trauma response of somebody who's not actualized.
Yeah, what I'm so drawn to is the shame of the rage response. That's what I keep trying to speak to with the game and playing to win. It's like I'm having this like intense response. Well, I think, and again, the reason why I said caught, something about that just feels very alive to me for her. Like of course it has to, because she's doing all this stuff in secret, right? And then she's getting caught. There's something about getting caught doing something in secret. Oh God, I'm having multiple threads at once here. Okay, let me just slow this down. I'm almost wondering if there was, like, if she is in some environment where there's like this thick wall of silence and there are things you're not allowed to speak to or address. And so then she's doing sneaky things behind the scenes to try to like get her needs met in some way. And then she's caught doing it. And then she's punished for it. So it's sort of like the ultimate in gaslighting. It's like, we're driving you into the shadows with our wall of silence. Then we're catching what you're doing in the shadows. And then we're punishing you for it. But there's something about the heat and the shame of getting caught, right? And that guy caught her. He caught her texting and swerving and was pointing like an accusing finger at her. And just even saying that, it's like, don't fucking point your finger at me. Kind of like what you're saying. Like, why does the world get away with this and I don't? Why do the hypocrites get away with their hypocrisy and I don't, right?
Shannon.
Yeah, well, isn't it interesting?
That's why she filmed Shannon.
Well, exactly. Isn't it interesting that what she was recording of Shannon was specifically emotional dysregulation, right?
Yes.
It's like, crazy Shannon raging. So then she has her own rage response, right? And I think anyone who's ever lost their temper, which is all of us, I think we can all relate. Like, you feel like you can feel so ashamed when that comes through.
Yes.
Like, there's something
you're out of your body. You're out of control.
There's something so shameful. I'm not saying I don't think people should be going and following other people home and raging at each other. But I want to be clear. I'm not saying it is shameful. I'm saying for someone like Katie to let that overtake her and to then be caught in it, it just feels so fucking shameful. I'm not going to give you the benefit of catching me here and seeing me in my shadow side. You're not going to get this fucking win. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I have articulated it. I feel like I keep circulating around it, but this feels like such a huge part of like the power game of, I'm not going to let you see what I'm doing, but I'm going to expose it in you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I wanted to know, I just pulled some cards on like her relationship to shame, and what I got from these cards is just like an unhealed inability to receive. And I'll leave it there. An unhealed inability to receive. And she did not get her needs met. So not getting your needs met, feeling like you can't receive love. And then it kind of made me think about her relationship sexually, even with her husband, where I feel like she holds a lot of power. I feel like she's able to have a lot of power in her relationship with her husband, sexually and otherwise, which that's not a bad thing. I think that's fine. But I don't know that her emotional needs have ever been met. And I don't think she thinks they ever will be. And I think that's where a lot of the shame lives too.
Yeah, it's almost like if I just keep slowing this down, I think like that sort of energetic metaphor that I came up with feels really right. This notion of like, I'm getting driven into the shadows where I act out. Then I get caught acting out in the shadows. And then I get punished for it. It just sort of feels like, yeah, I guess it's just as simple as the fact that like the rage becomes quote unquote, well, certainly ammunition against me. And it becomes evidence that I'm the one who's wrong, that I'm the one who's crazy. And that's not fair because I'm only raging like this because of, to your point, the way that I got driven into the shadows in the first place. It becomes this sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Like the rage feeds the shame feeds the rage.
Yes, because I think my point here with the shame piece is that if the fear is you'll never get your needs met by anybody, that if you cannot receive, like, because I really don't think she has a strong relationship with any of the girls. We don't see her building relationships in a way that feels like that strong to me, because I don't believe that she thinks she's ever going to get her needs met in relationship to others, that she doesn't have power over like a husband or kids. So if I'm never going to get my needs met, then I'm constantly always having to navigate through manipulation, which is obviously going to make me rage out from time to time. But let's just hope people don't catch it. And I think it's coming from a place of like, and I deserve it because of what I've been through. There's a certain righteousness to it. I don't think she can slow down. And I think that's why it's hard for you to slow down with her. I don't think she ever has.
Yeah, it would totally make sense, that notion. And I agree with you like that. in that context, a relationship that has the quality of a pact makes sense, right? Because a pact is very much, it's us against the world.
Yes.
You know, which is like that flavor of a relationship makes total sense to someone who comes from the viewpoint of like basically everyone's playing to win. So it's like we're a little team in a world where you can't trust anyone and we've got each other's back to the end. And that's like a huge basis of our love for each other. Well, it's so interesting because like, yeah, so just kind of if I just have this impulse to sort of like keep tracking the through line. But yeah, it was just for me, it was this feeling of like, once she took the loss with Heather or refused to take the loss and realized that the player had been played and she'd kind of been set up by these women and hung out to dry. And that's also part of what's so interesting about Katie and what makes her such an interesting sort of question mark in all of this is that she's not actually really that good at what she does. I don't know. I mean, she's probably better at it in real life, but maybe kind of like with Bronwyn Newport, maybe the cameras kind of complicate things where it's just a lot easier to catch her in what she does than when she's not being documented and held accountable by multiple different people. But, you know, once she sort of lost that battle with Heather and was sort of hung out to dry, the pivot became, oh, it's Gina's fault. Like, Gina, she literally is like, Gina, you set me up. You told me to go into this confrontation and then you didn't have my back. And then she goes to Heather and is like, Heather, I just really want to make this okay with you. I just feel like Gina really set me up. And, you know, Heather, to her credit, like she kind of clocked it. Like, I don't know. I think she even said it right to Katie's face where she was just like, Katie, like the thing for you to do right now is just to take ownership of what you did. Like, don't punt the ball over to Gina. But I really feel like in the place where this was like muted, inverted, passive aggressive version of following the guy home, it's like, oh, wait, I lost this battle with Heather. Okay, Gina, you're going to pay the price now. And then she comes up with this story that Gina wanted Katie to go out, like that basically Gina wanted Katie to go after Heather because Gina didn't want to go after Heather herself because Gina said, essentially, I'm using Heather for her professional contacts. And, you know, this kind of comes to a climax at this like wine country lunch, I think that they were having. And, you know, rewatching it, I actually felt really bad for Gina because you can really see like she is distraught. Like she's really upset. She seems completely bowled over by this lie. You know, there was stuff going on with her relationship last season too. So I think she was already just sort of fragile. But, you know, you can really see kind of like the impact Katie's maneuvering has on like, you know, what I'm kind of assuming is a bit of an innocent bystander in all this. But it's so interesting because even then, is it Gina or Emily? Someone asks Katie, like specifically, what did Gina say to you? And that's when Katie says, I wrote it down, Heather and I are close. She helps me with my career, which is much different than I'm using her for her contacts and I don't want to piss her off. You know what I mean? Because I need her for my business. And even Emily is like, there's nothing wrong.
Way different.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, so again, it's like, I think that she wanted, I think in the place where information is currency and she's playing to win. And I think that she had that kind of like vengeful, shame-based rage towards Gina for quote unquote hanging her out to dry. I think she was angling for a win where she and Heather were going to unite against Gina. And Gina was going to be the one who was going to pay the price for like hanging her out to dry. Now, she fumbled the ball once again. So, you know, and that's actually the lunch where she says, because Gina's getting really upset. And she's like, Gina, don't hate me. I'm weak. I'm weak. And so she takes that loss. Do you need to say anything in response to that?
Keep going. I do have something to say, but it's a little separate. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's when I think that's when we kind of pivot to the back half of the season where suddenly she gets this information from her daughter about what Emily's kids were saying about Heather. And I think, again, for Katie, this just became another way to get back in the car and follow Heather home. It's like, now I've got, like, again, information's power, information's currency. I now have proof that Emily, you know, also has issues with Heather. So not only do I get to expose Heather again and take her down for taking me down, I also get to take down Emily for being one of the people who essentially set me up to take the fall. And then I think she sort of ran with that in a weird way where she also enlisted her daughter to kind of help her do the dirty work, which is all just to say, like, I feel like Katie just kind of keeps backing herself into this corner. She won't just pull over to the side of the road, take a breath, and let the guy go home. She has to have the win. And trying to go for the win, and I think this is what you're saying about the karmic healing that's available for her, the more she tries to win this game in Orange County, the more she keeps losing the game.
And now with Kiki and all of the other stuff, she's doing the exact same thing. The word that kept coming to me when you were talking about her and, her inability to be accountable, is that, and the theme in the show in the last couple episodes is people are literally screaming across the table, be accountable. Not only just to Katie. Actually, Katie's out of the conversation now. Her accountability has been proven that she won't be. And it's sort of giving her a scapegoat, like, oh, I'm just not going to be accountable and I'm going to be calm, cool, and collected about it, to the point where people just stop asking. Whereas you have somebody like Tamra, whose accountability is always a question, right? And then you have, I think even like Jen's like, be accountable. And then Gina's like, be accountable. And everybody's screaming the word accountability. And that is a huge theme in the show. Is like everybody's got and Gretchen's wants this, everybody wants accountability from the other person. That seems to be like, if I were to like act out the scene for like a drama class, like what would my desire be between each conversation? I want them to be accountable, right? Like that would be my desire. And the problem with accountability with these types of groups of women or people, is that people who feel that they are truly a victim, for example, let's just use Tamra because it's pretty overt and obvious. Like she was truly victimized by her husband, right? We know this. We saw the footage. He was pretty awful, and she has a precarious upbringing and did not get her needs met, yada, yada. So because she's a victim and she never really healed that. And then she felt victimized by her daughter, which, by the way, like I actually side with the daughter. I know you and I have different views on this, but I think because she feels like she's the victim and that was never healed, a victim can't be accountable, right? Because everything that they do is a response to them being the victim. So if my vantage point and everything that I see is I'm the victim and I'm just trying to survive this hellscape of everybody out to get me, then I can't be a victim. I'm just living in the world that they created and they put on me. So that's why I say when we're going back to this guy in the car and this trauma responses, everything's Katie's presenting as a trauma response. If she feels she's the victim, so it's okay. I don't feel bad about lying because I'm the victim of them, of society, of an all white society, like, right. And which is true, like it's almost like, it's why it's like, I don't really believe in reverse racism or all these different things. Like it's, if you have the actual offenders telling you that you're lying, you don't care because they're the wrong, right? So that's sort of why I think a lot of these women sort of feel like Gretchen can do a little lie here. Jen might even do a little lie here.
Oh, wait. Jen lies a lot. Let's just be clear about that, but keep going.
Exactly. And Tamra lies over here and all of them. Well, Tamra is just, she lies to herself about her own behavior, right? But like, so we've got all these little sort of like, and even Gina will just get into like, they've all gotten into a web at some point and had to get themselves out of it. And they all feel justified in the lie because of the environment being toxic, right? So how am I going to be accountable to an unaccountable toxic environment? I'm not going to do it. And that's why they're never going to get the accountability they seek because it's not an accountable environment.
Right.
The environment itself is created by smoke and mirrors. It's Andy Cohen verse. It's not the universe. It's Andy Cohen verse. It's not reality.
Well, and that's the thing. None of them are willing to take the accountability that they demand from others, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this is good. Well, let's pivot a little. I do want to keep coming back to Katie, but because, well, there's two things I want to say. Like, yeah, I think you just articulated that so well. And the way that I would kind of distill it even further, the voice I'm hearing from Katie and from this energetic pattern is you put me in the box and then you blamed me for being in the box. and it's not fucking fair. And like, that's where the rage is. And I think that's where the freeze is, right? Because again, it's the powerlessness of the situation. So it's like the only power I really have is to kind of not show you how much this is getting to me and to also try to wield my magic and win from the sidelines, because I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't, basically.
Yes.
But yeah, let's come back to this notion of accountability. And maybe this will widen this out a little bit into Orange County just as like a macro energetic pattern, just as a whole, as a show. Because I love what you're saying about accountability and then just what I said about no one's willing to take the accountability they want from others. Gretchen and Tamra are the perfect reflection of this, right? Because it's like, and I mean, I'm curious if you have any hits about the fact that we're now unearthing and relitigating drama from like 15 years ago, which for some reason is it's fascinating to me. I feel like we're in Back to the Future 2, where like we're going back to the first movie, but like seeing it in a new light. But anyways, going back to the genesis of Gretchen and Tamra, it's like, I can never pick a dog in this fight, right? Because what I saw from, Tamra back then, in a lot of ways, she kind of reminds me of what we just saw play out with Janet on the Valley. It's like, it's not that she was wrong in the information about Gretchen. Like, Gretchen, by all appearances, she was sort of living one life on camera with this fiance, Jeff. From all testimonies from many different people, she was living a different life behind the scenes. And apparently, I don't remember all the details of the drama back then, but like, Tamra was getting phone calls from Gretchen's secret lover, who was also her stalker and her harasser. And Gretchen was like, pretending to be something that maybe she wasn't. Now, whether Jeff, her fiance at the time, knew that, I don't know. I don't know if they had an arrangement. I don't know if this was behind his back, but there was some sort of disconnect between what Gretchen was presenting on the show and sort of who she was off camera, right? And then just sort of moving forward, again, obviously none of us have the actual facts, but if you choose to do your research and you look into things, it does seem very likely that Slade has not been what we would call a stand-up dad to his sick son who ultimately died. And it seems like Gretchen kind of enabled his ducking out of financial responsibility. And it seems like there's evidence that they also then used the son's sickness and death as kind of like, for sympathy, like when it was convenient for them. Like it just feels apparent. Again, I want to be careful. None of this, I'm not allegedly. It's just if you go and you do the research, the stuff that Tamra is saying about Gretchen isn't necessarily wrong, right? The problem was that the intention behind the way Tamra went after Gretchen all those years ago, it did not feel like it was just in service of the truth. It felt like she was triggered by Gretchen, that there was like deep contempt for her, perhaps competition, insecurity, jealousy, whatever you want to call it. There was a vicious desire to expose Gretchen. And then we saw that with Naked Wasted. Naked Wasted is when it reached its sort of most horrific climax, right? So it's difficult because Tamra is not taking accountability for her negative intention, her desire to take Gretchen down, to expose her, to humiliate her, and to annihilate her. And that's why a lot of people were really on Gretchen's side, right? Now, conversely, it's nearly impossible for me to side with Gretchen to this day. And there's something a little bit similar with Jen, too, where it's like Gretchen's mad at Tamra, but then where she goes with it is, and she tells all these lies about me, and she's defaming me, and she's defaming Slade. And that's where I'm like, Gretchen, you're kind of losing me here because you're victimizing yourself in relationship to Tamra's quote unquote lies. But I don't really think they're actually lies. And as we're sort of seeing play out, like Gretchen has a very shaky relationship with the truth. And so for me, this conflict has always felt irreconcilable because neither one of them's ever willing to take true accountability for what needs to be taken true accountability for, which is Tamra needs to sit there and say, I wanted to destroy you and annihilate you. I hated you. I was jealous of you. Whatever it is, I am sorry that I went after you so hard. And Gretchen's never going to sit there and say, you know what, Tamara, you were right about these things that you said. And I understand how infuriating it must have been that, like, I tried to sort of blame you for my own, like, you know, inconsistencies and my own sort of lack of character. Like, neither one of them is ever just going to sit down and own it. And so, like, there's nowhere for them to go. You know what I mean?
I love what you're bringing in here because I think this ties into everything that we've been talking about today. Because, and again, microcosm of the world, what's like ringing loud and clear is who's the villain? Who's the villain, right? And it goes back to what you talk about with the Curacao. Like, it's just who's the villain in the story. And what will bring Gretchen down is her desire to get everyone against Tamara. That will be the thing to bring her down. If she continues to desire to prove the point that Tamara causes, now she says, Tamara causes actual harm. Here's what's infuriating to the audience like myself watches Tamara over and over and over and over and over again. Tamara does cause a lot of harm. She does. And she doesn't, she'll see it, she'll get annoyed by it, she'll feel ashamed by it, and she'll be like, yeah, I get it. And then she just wants to shove it under the rug because she already has so much shame around it that she also has a mechanism in her brain where she can block out her actions because she feels she's the victim still. She's able to do that. Our brains are able to do that, actually. Our brains have that mechanism where we can literally just shut out our own thing if we still feel we're a victim, if we still feel that we have, self-righteousness and all this stuff. And like, we can actually be like, yeah, I did that, but I was. And we can actually black out actual events where we may have mistreated and acted. I've certainly been able to do that when I've had a trauma response. And so I go back to trauma response. But who's the villain? Well, we're dealing with that politically in the U.S. Who's the villain in this story? When you watch a movie and Marvel character, it's very clear who the villain is. But in the world today, it's very unclear. There's multiple different sides and stories. I mean, I think I know who the villain is, right? I can say, but then it becomes two sides, two parties. One party says that's the villain. The other party says that's the villain. And here we are pointing like the scarecrow at each other, getting nowhere. And that is sort of something that's up in the world right now, karmically, and definitely up in the show. You can see that Tamara did cause harm. You can actually see on her face she knows she did. You can see it. You can see that she knows she caused harm. You can see that she knows that she damaged, and I'm sorry, her daughter, right? There's damage that's been done, but she kind of doesn't give a fuck. And that's sort of, it's like she cares, but she can't care and survive at the same time. She can't sleep at night if she feels that she's caused this much harm. There's no way that she could admit that she caused that much harm and be able to survive and sleep at night with also being a victim who's still unhealed, right? And I just think there's so much trauma in her life that's unhealed that I do think it's turned into cognitive decline as far as being able to develop. And so that's where I have a piece of compassion for her, because I do think that she's sick right now, right? And you can see that in the last episode, this is a sick person right now. And so it's hard to watch in many ways. But with Gretchen, what you're seeing with Gretchen, and why I'm with you on this, it's hard to ride or die for her, right? It's hard to take her side when her vitriol towards needing everyone to hate. And Jen is the same boat. They're both going to drive themselves into the ground with the desire to villainize Tamara. And by the way, let's bring God into it because they're Christians, okay? If you, sorry, God, no, if you have actual faith in yourself and in your truth, when you're harmed by somebody, you don't have to prove
right
and make sure the rest of the world agrees with you. You'll let the scales of life balance themselves out. And if you know your truth, and if that person is in fact a villain, eventually the scales of life will balance and show itself to be.
Right.
But this is where these two women, Jen and Gretchen, have lost their faith, and they've lost their rage and anger and desire to make Tamara pay and be persecuted and be punished is now driven their personalities in a way that will allow them to start lying. And this is what's going to bring them down.
Well, but I also think they both were already lying, which is part of what triggers Tamara in the first place. I mean, maybe we need to save this for a Tamara episode.
Yes,
but what I love about what you're saying is yes, I agree with you. There's this drive to take Tamara down, to make her pay, for what she did, which again, interesting given the context of everything we're exploring in Katie, right? But also going back to what I said, that was originally Tamara's downfall with Gretchen. That's what I was speaking to. It's like she wanted Gretchen taken down at all costs. She wanted everyone to see it, just like
karma.
Janet wanted everyone to see Danny, on the Valley.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's such an astute point that now Gretchen and I, sort of to a lesser degree, but I agree, Gen 2 are consumed by that same drive, and it's going to take them down the same way that it's taken Tamara down. And I think it's so interesting because, again, just to wind it out to the collective, it's like what I was talking about in the last episode about the Valley. It's like, to me, it is that equivalent of like the person in the comments section who's immediately like, you MAGA Trumper. And then the person who's like, you liberal snowflake. It's like, it's just, right. It's the same. It's two different faces of the same energy. It's like, it's like the two people on the internet who are going to like fight back and forth, basically saying the same thing as one another. They just want to have the last word. It's Katie and this guy on the road, right? He's speeding up to give her the finger and yell at her, and she's following home to yell at him. And again, that's what I was saying before. It's like, there's no actual connection here to something that's actually righteous or like, coming back to how it started, the truth, whatever that means. This is about playing to win.
Yes.
Like something got taken from me and I want to reclaim it and I want to fucking win at all costs. So it's interesting, like these themes and these patterns are playing out. Now, the last thing I want to say about this particular idea is bringing this back to Katie. I love what you brought in about who is the villain, right? Because I was thinking about this and you were saying, like in a Marvel movie, it's clear who the villain is. It's clear who the hero is. There's a binary viewpoint there. We know what the quote unquote dramatic truth of a Marvel movie is, unlike a movie like Rashomon, right? Now, coming back to Katie, I think she's so interesting and she's such like a sophisticated archetype of the times, because going back to Salt Lake City, right, where we had Monica, who was the reality Von Teese, right? With Monica, because I mean, to me, they kind of inhabit a similar vibe of like the outsider who infiltrated the group and is kind of like bringing in this meta conversation of like playing the game rather than sort of the quote unquote, authenticity of the reality of the show and the relationships. Monica, though, to me, I guess is very, whatever year that was, 2024, because she, to me, was much more the binary villain. Like even before she was revealed as reality Von Teese, Monica came on strong. She lived out loud. Her energy, by design was abrasive, provocative. And then when she was unmasked as reality Von Teese, it was just very easy to point a finger at her and be like, you're the villain. You did this, da-da-da-da-da-da. Katie is so interesting to me. I mean, again, just going back to the viewer reaction, is Katie a villain who's like taking all this too far, or is she a persecuted victim? She's like got this like rage and drive for power, but it's hidden behind this clumsy, who me? I was just being silly. It's like you can't quite peg her and you don't quite know who she is. Or going back to earlier, is she the mirror holding up? Yeah, is she the one holding up the mirror to Bravo and reality TV? Or is Bravo and reality TV holding up the mirror to her? There's this big question mark with her where she's kind of everything all at once. And so I do think that's just interesting from kind of like, if we're looking at this from the perspective of like, yeah, the collective, the systemic, the deeper invitation here, it's like and this is what she's bringing up in the cast. It's like, if they're all doing this, which they are, you know what I mean? Like Emily is so pissed because she probably is talking shit about Heather behind her back and doesn't want to get called out on it. Gretchen is getting really upset right now because she's getting caught in her own lies while like being on her high horse about how much damage. I mean, look at that. Gretchen is literally sitting there all this time being like, Tamara, the damage you do through your lies, which, by the way, I don't think Tamara is really lying that much about Gretchen. Meanwhile, Gretchen, it seems, is going around behind the scenes spreading actual lies about being roofied, which, by the way, is not to take away from Naked Wasted, which was horrifying, but still, she's spreading her own lies, And then meanwhile, you've got Jen. I don't know how the fuck Jen's getting away with all of her shit. I mean, even just going back to the beginning of the season where Gina was like, hey, your friend Jen called you a con artist. Somehow Jen wiggled out of that. Jen wiggles out of everything. But the point being, Katie is essentially bringing in this question on the show and within the audience of like, who is the villain here? And I think that is kind of like, if Orange County right now is just a TV version of that Spider-Man meme where it's like two Spider-Men pointing the finger at one another, I think that is kind of like what is going on with us as a collective, at least in this country, politically.
I think about it all the time.
Yeah, there's something else I want to bring into this, but I want to pause there because I just know I said a lot.
No, it's something that I wanted to post about and talk about, like, occurred to me, like, I think 6 months ago, because it's just, you can have two different people watch the same exact clip of the president talking, and you will have two different, very visceral, very passionate responses of one saying Messiah and the other saying Satan. And so it does sort of bring in the archetypal themes of a lot of religions, which were based around politics anyway. But like all of this stuff is what are we I think the question that we have to ask ourselves, myself included, is I've done this behavior where I feel so victimized by somebody that like I need the world to see them the way that I see them. And I later found out the way that I saw them was tampered with my own trauma. And the way that I saw them was that had a bad filter on it, right? Because I was hurt. And not to say that they didn't do something wrong, but my desire to get the world to see them do something wrong was my own unhealed trauma. So when we're pointing and needing everybody to agree with us, is because we don't trust our own reality, because we don't trust ourselves, because we were told not to trust ourselves. So we all live in a very fucked up environment, and we all live in a beautiful universe, right? So I'm not trying to say I'm not a pessimist, but we all do live in an environment where we're told to denounce our truth. And so we just pathologize in all these weird ways where we act it out through people, and all these people are the mirrors. I love that you're bringing in the term mirror, because actually in my own personal life, if I'm a mirror for somebody and they can't see and they keep projecting and pointing at me, which I've done and it's happened to me and it happens in life, then I need to remove myself so that they no longer have me as the mirror so that they can look at themselves. Right. And so when or vice versa. Sometimes I've had to remove myself from situations because I'm turning somebody else into a mirror and they don't deserve that. They don't deserve that role. And so we're all role playing with our own pathology, trying to heal ourselves all the time unconsciously. And you've got these women who are like, they feel so deeply inside of themselves. If I can get the world to see that they're wrong, I'm going to feel better. Yeah. That's the fucking delusion. The delusion that if I'm right, I'll feel better. The delusion that if other people agree with me, I'll feel better. The delusion that if they are persecuted and punished, this part of me will go away. When this part of me lives in me, it's not external.
Yeah. And that's why it's like, I just keep coming back to the politics of it all, where you see this on both sides, where it's like on both the right and the left. Well, if you do it, it is awful. But if we do it, it's either there's a reason why it's okay, or I think with the left, it's usually more like the means justify the ends. So we've got to win at all costs because we're the good guys. And by the way, just because I know people get triggered, not that this should matter. I am on the left. I vote Democratic, but still, I see things and I see what's going on in the left. And I am a very reluctant member of the left because of this. But it's like, we got to win at all costs. So if we need to brush over some stuff, it's okay, because the ends justify the means. But if the right does it, you know what I mean? That's just another example of like their hypocrisy. But it also goes both ways. I mean, the right obviously is willing. I mean, the right, not all of the right, some of the right is able and willing to throw out the entire Constitution, in order to, and again, what are we talking about? We're talking about winning. It's the drive to win. And I think I just want to bring this back to Orange County. I've been thinking about this from the very beginning when you said Katie is a survivor, and it just got me thinking about Orange County, part of the reason why I love this franchise is I think this franchise is about survivors. You know, like Tamra Judge, and this is why I've had a soft spot for her. She's a fucking survivor. You know what I mean? Like she got out of that marriage. She created something new for herself. And I think she's been surviving all along. I think she was surviving initially in her relationship to Simon. You know what I mean? And then she was surviving out of that relationship with Simon. Vicky is a survivor who likewise got out of a bad first marriage, created a successful business. You know, I think Jen has a real learned helplessness, but she's doing her version of surviving. I think Gina is surviving. And even Emily, I mean, again, Emily, you know, when she talks about her history of like coming from nothing and you get
neglected.
You get this sense, like she talks about the wealth she married into. Like I do get, and she's even talked about like, well, if Shane divorced me, I kind of have nothing. Like there is a quality in her of like, I'm dragging myself up from my humble beginnings. The only one, Heather, doesn't necessarily feel like a survivor to me in that way, but it's just interesting that Orange, and now Shannon too, you know, like post-divorce, like she's survived.
Yeah, Shannon's a survivor of her own chaos. And really, really quickly, because I know you want to go back to this point, but when you were talking about, it just came so big to me. You're talking about the political aspects of going back and forth. It's also starting to, when we see Newsom starting to fight back, it's also starting to penetrate something that's needed on both sides too.
Yes.
So there's always this like bigger picture, the divine consciousness was like, why are we being faced with these things? Because something needs to penetrate the lie that we're all living in too. Like the idea that make America great again. Well, it was only great for some people back then. So that's an illusion. And then this idea of like, oh, let's just get back to the way things were before Trump. It's like, well, that's also an illusion.
Yeah, total
so
illusion.
It's sort of like each thing that is poking at both sides will maybe break the ceiling that needs to be broken for us to take a look a little bit deeper about how the things are being presented. And same with the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, you know, what I keep hearing in all this is like when the need to win, no pun intended, when the need to win.
Yes, 100%.
When the need to win trumps principle. You know, like that's what I see. And it's like, it's just so interesting. It's like, I mean, not to get reductive, but like when I see people, you know, when I try to kind of stay offline with this stuff because it's sometimes it can just be so demoralizing. But sometimes I research and when I poke around and when I see people saying things like, basically anyone who voted for Trump is X, Y, or Z. And because they voted for him, I know exactly who they are. They are beyond hope. They are this, they are that. We are fundamentally like, you know, different, da, 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 da. And I'm just sort of sitting there like, okay, can you imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. had thought this way? Like, can you imagine if like Gandhi had thought this way? Like, it's like, I am sure most of these people who speak that way would love and respect Martin Luther King Jr. and what he did. You know what I mean? And what did he do? Like, he was willing to hold compassionate space in part for the very people who were exhibiting the worst of the behavior. Like that was literally the medicine, the willingness to meet people where they were. So it's like at a certain point, you have to be willing. Again, we want accountability without taking accountability. You have to be willing to model the very thing that you want to create in the world. And it doesn't mean that you bypass what's going on. It doesn't mean you don't challenge it. It doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean you don't hold people responsible. But it's the willingness to walk with actual principle, kind of like what you're saying, trusting that the deeper vibration, the deeper truth will emerge, and that the race to win at all costs keeps everyone in a losing cycle, because then we're just in the energy of division. We're in the division of power plays, and power plays are just going to lead to more power plays.
There you go. You brought up Martin Luther King too, and one of my favorite quotes he has is, "We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools." And when you're going back to, because you were also talking about the survivor aspect of it. And I love that because you're talking at the top of the episode about power. And then about a quarter of the way through, we were talking about that power is coming from feeling powerless. When we feel powerless, because, I understand why some people say that about Trump, because he literally is like dismantling things that will actually cause harm in the world. And I don't empathize I don't have a soft spot for Tamara, and I don't have a soft, so I understand the staunch sort of like, well, he's being staunch and Tamara's being like damaging. So why the fuck should I sit silently and be Gandhi and be peaceful when these people are out here causing damage and getting away with it? And I think that's what drives people to be like, I can't tolerate this anymore. So, and that's why Gavin Newsom coming forward is like, people are thinking, thank God. I think the problem is we haven't found our balance of how to have energetic, grounded, spiritual boundaries without losing ourselves when we feel powerless over people that are abusing power. How do we hold a boundary without causing harm and losing ourselves in the desire to beat the person who's the abuser? If we're fighting against the abuser, do we then become the abuser, and how do we find our way?
Well, that's the issue. It's like holding the boundary without abandoning principle. So for me,
that's right.
It's the difference between, and I want to say, like, yes, you are right. There are real things happening in the country and in the world right now, which is why I said it doesn't mean we bypass that. You know what I mean? Like, we're not turning a blind eye to that, and we're not minimizing the destruction of that. But for me, it's like the difference if we like bring this to the personal relational level. It's like if I'm pissed at you, Molly, or let's say you're acting out towards me, it's just sort of the difference between me sitting here and saying, you know what, Molly, like, I'm really angry with you and I'm not okay with this. And this is my boundary. And this is what needs to change in this, or this relationship is going to end, versus me screaming and yelling at you, calling you a bitch and you're this and you're that, and then calling all your friends to badmouth you and trying to get you fired from your job. And you did this to me. So you stole my stuff. So now I'm going to steal your stuff. It's like, no, you stole my stuff. Like, okay, let me call the cops. Let me file a police report. Okay, let me, move out of this situation and take care of myself. But when I have the opportunity to take a low blow against you, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to own my rage and my heartbreak, but I'm not going to like take it out on you. So to me, I mean, there is like a balance here. It's like Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, I feel sort of ridiculous talking about him because, to be honest, I'm not, I don't even know. I'm not like an expert in his history or his background. Yeah. But I think there's an important principle there, or like Michelle Obama saying, when we go low, they go high. Like when they go low, we go high. Everyone loves to quote that. But I'm like, are you living it? Because the whole point is when they go low, we go high. So the low is, what you're calling the deplorables and the people that you think are beyond hope. Like, that's when you're supposed to go high. It's not when they go low, we go high, except for when they go really low and then they deserve us going low too. It's like, because that is the energy of creation, then everyone's low.
So how do you stand in your power against an abusive power?
Well, I mean, did I not just speak to that?
Yeah, but I'm asking almost for clarification one more time. As somebody who's actually trying to do this in my own world, is like, how do you did just answer it, but like, how do you stand? Let's just do Jen and Tamara. Jen probably had some lies, and the stuff with Ryan was really confusing. So Tamara's calling it out, but the way that Tamara called it out was actually really inappropriate, damaging. And if somebody did that to me, I would not want to be in that person's orbit again. Like, the way that she attacked Ryan was like next level. And she also just doesn't really care how she acts because she continues to do it over and over and over again. So I could see why Jen is just sort of like so pissed now that she's like, no, I'm not going to put up with it anymore. But then she's starting to lose her power. So it's a hard balance. And like Martin Luther King started, like we'll perish as fools. Like, are we perishing as fools in this moment right now? And it goes back to what you said earlier. Like, if our desire is to win, that egoic desire to win will take us down. So how do we check our motives and come up with a different desire? And going back to what you said about principle, is how do we get back to our principle?
I think this is I'm just going to kind of like improv with you and play along with this. If I'm Jen, this is a tricky situation, right? Because Tamara is possibly speaking to some things that might, have some truth to them, both around the genesis of this relationship with Ryan. And also, look, again, we don't really know what's going on with Ryan. We just know that, he's had some unsavory associations where he's been involved in a FBI case that most of us don't end up in that situation in our lives. So, obviously Jen's not going to want, if there are shades of truth, to some of the stuff that Tamara's pointing out. And by the way, I even believe, Tamara, that, does it seem like maybe Jen kind of wanted to get on this show? And do I believe that Jen just ended up at Cut Fitness because it was literally close to her yoga studio? No, I get what Tamara's trying to say. It feels like Jen probably wanted to get on the show. Wonderful. I think if it's Jen and you're dealing with someone like Tamara, who has this kind of vitriolic need to expose you and is sort of hitting on things that you don't feel like you should even have to answer to, I think for me, it would be about sort of sitting across from Tamara and basically saying really clearly, Tamara, at this point, this isn't even about the information that you're bringing out or not bringing out. It's about the intention with which you're bringing it. It feels like you're weaponizing it against me. It feels like you've had an intention to expose me and to humiliate me. And it ultimately feels like this has nothing to do with me and just sort of everything to do with you. If you can't meet me here, we have nothing to talk about.
And maybe too, going back to all your work that you talk about that I love talking about too, is the dark feminine. It's just sort of also we're still navigating the waters of if me standing, because what you just said is a perfectly regulated emotional response. But is there room also for Jem to be fierce without losing herself? And that's that denouncement of the dark feminine, and quote unquote, it was called Eve was called the seductress, the bad one, the dark feminine. And it's that's how we disavowed our own energy towards our boundaries. Queen of Swords, which is Queen of Swords gets a bad rap as the old maid, but really she's just holding the same sword as the Justice card of these are my boundaries. I'm going to hold them firmly. I'm going to hold them with faith. I'm going to hold them with love. And I don't care if you call me a bitch for it. I don't care if you call me cold for it. I don't care if society claims that I'm a cold woman. This is what I'm doing in the name of love. Because the dark feminine, quote unquote, dark feminine by society, but actually just somebody who's rooted in love and truth and like a tree, literally the seed of life, right? So that rooting is I will not stand for what you're doing to me. And I'm going to tell you that in a way that's coming from a place of love of the truth. And that's sort of that's where I feel we're all navigating, because then we let our emotions get away with us. And then the desire to be right and wrong comes in, like you're saying, and we lose our principle, as you were bringing up earlier. And there's a way where it's how do we allow ourselves to do that and be firm without losing ourselves completely? And I think it's such a beautiful question. I guess we're seeing play out.
I have no problem with anger.
No, I know you don't. That's why I'm bringing it to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I'm just sort of going back to I don't know why this is flashing in my head, but season 9 reunion of Atlanta, and Candy just sitting there when Phaedra was exposed for spreading these rumors, and Candy just sat there and was just basically expressed the truth of her experience and her feelings with such a unmitigated ferocity, where she's I had people in my comment sections calling me Bill Cosby, this is what happened to me. And then, now it's the meme, the lies, the lies, the lies. So Candy was showing up in the sheer ferocity of her righteous rage and calling something out. Now, for me, it's that's a direct expression of the rage. And just going with this as a hypothetical example, assuming Candy then didn't go behind the scenes and start, if Candy had then started spreading rumors about, so we saw this, okay, sorry, I'm many thoughts at once. If Candy had then sort of started going around spreading false rumors about Phaedra, right? It's she's getting in the mud. Or if she's even sitting there on that reunion stage being well, Phaedra, what I heard about you is that you did X, Y, and Z, right? She's getting in the mud. But instead, in that moment, she's just claiming the ferocious truth of her feelings, the impact this had on her, and the boundaries. Now, the thing that came in, by contrast, even though I love who I'm about to bring up, looking at someone like Meredith Marks, right? It's she got really hurt. She got really hurt by Lisa's hot mic moment, which she had a right to be hurt by, right? But it's rather than just kind of owning the depth of her rage in a really clean, clear, let's just call it the dark feminine way, what does she start doing? She starts plotting things behind the scenes, planting rumors. And then, it's a perfect example. Meredith I don't know if Meredith was playing to win, but she was definitely playing to get revenge and to punish. And that was her undoing, because the moment she did that, she lost all moral high ground. So these people do each other a favor when they get in the mud, because it's like, well, Gretchen, you've now lost all moral high ground. So I hope I'm answering your question. I think there's just
You are. It's perfect, because it's like Jen last season, in that moment when they were getting their hair done, she like stood in her fierceness with Tamara, and it was perfect. And now if she continues to go down this right, same with Gavin Newsom, like same with like standing, and who knows what his motives are, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like standing against abusive power, there's a way to do it that's going to actually like stand the test of time. And there's a way to do it where you will turn yourself into the powerless one yet again. And so, yes, you totally answered my question. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, because I was going to say in terms of Jen, even though I get a little annoyed by how much people seem to fall for Jen's sort of like nice girl act. But what I will say, she's had some amazing moments, I think, of really standing her ground with Tamara, giving it back to her. Yeah, righteously standing in her truth. I think that's been like growth for her. But to your point, and I guess just to clarify this for the audience, where I see Jen now disempowering herself is the way that she's playing fast and loose with the truth, right? So it's like she's abandoning principle. She's so mad at Tamara for lying, and yet she's going to, first of all, deny it when apparently she was at that lunch where Katie first talked about the recording with Alexis. Oh, what? That didn't happen. She's going to...
It's getting messy now.
Yeah, she's going to deny it when it comes out that Gretchen was saying she was roofied by Tamara, because to your point, she wants to win. She doesn't want to give Tamara any leverage. So that's where she's going to start losing. So yes to owning your righteous rage, your feelings, your experience. Yes to strong boundaries. Yes to meeting people where they're at. But no to abandoning principle in the process. No for getting them the way they got you. No for winning. And I do want to bring this back around to OC in a more direct way, but did you need to say anything in response to that?
No, I think that's beautiful. And I think I literally think this is where our country is right now. And we will either completely lose ourselves to fight for the right thing, or we will find a way to stand in some sort of firm setting boundaries with love, and being firm and fierce from the placement of love meaning I'm thinking of the quote unquote right thing, which I just don't want to say right or wrong, because that's can be construed in so much, but standing in your truth, right? Like standing in your truth in a way that is productive versus allowing yourself to need to get so off kilter by buying in to what's happening of needing to prove that somebody else is wrong. Mm-hmm. It's such a fine line. It is such a fine line. It's actually what drives so much childhood, like repetitions of like what my parents did to me and then acting it out in life, because you never felt like they were going to be, and you have to learn like they can't be accountable with the tools that they were given, blah, 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 blah. And then you act it out and you try to find other partners where you're going to, it's such a driving force of humanity. And it's such an interesting conversation.
Well, and this is how I want to bring it back around to OC, because I just think it's so interesting that, I was going to say we are identifying OC as kind of a franchise of survivors. And the kind of link that we seem to be making between the will to survive and the will to win, and how those two things commingle. And it's sort of like, because again, survival, there's limited, this systemically limited resources, only so much. One person wins, one person loses. So I got to get mine while I can.
Yes.
So, it's interesting that we're sort of seeing this play out. And again, that's kind of what Katie is holding up a mirror to, is the way in which all of these women are playing to win in terms, like in context of the show, but yeah, again, in context of their lives, because this show is part of how they're winning. And then they want to win part of how they're winning in life. And that's how they also want to win within the show. They want to win within the show to keep winning within life. And it's all it seems very connected to this will to survive and to come out on top. And, to your point, to like rise above the circumstances that originally tried to keep me down. But at a certain point, once you're out, this is, of course, a lot of the work I do with clients. Once you're actually out of survival mode, which all these women pretty much are, you know what I mean? they're doing well. You know what I mean? It's about kind of learning, and this is what we're talking about with Katie. Oh, like survival strategies helped me get this far. Thank you for helping me survive, because there was a point where I needed you to survive. But maybe now that I've survived, I can put the survival strategy down and I can start to rest into the life that I've created and cultivate some more surrender and kind of understand a little bit more where this is coming from inside me and how do I return to principle. I do have one last question I want to ask you, but do you need to say anything in response to that?
No, I just love that it's the irony of needing to win becomes our own demise.
Yeah, that's the soul's journey, right? It's like, this is what we have to bump up against the limitations of our story or our matrix. Like, that's what's happening to Katie right now. This has helped her get to where she is. This helped her get to the show. But now she's bumping up against the limitations of it. And the soul invitation is, oh, maybe this isn't working for me anymore. Let me look at what I'm doing, because maybe there's a reality behind the reality. You know, so we all do this. We saw this was like, that's what happened with Tom Sandoval. What used to work for him blew up in his fucking face. You know what I mean? It's like, this is your invitation, Tom. Like, time for you to look at this.
It's crazy.
You know, I don't think he really did, unfortunately, but.
No, I had a visual as you were talking about, they're all climbing. I just see like Katie and now Tom Sandoval's totally climbing Mount Olympus, and they get to the top and it's got pillars and it's beautiful. And then they walk in and it's just filled with mirrors right back at them. That's the visual I got as you were talking.
Well, you know, and so maybe, I don't know, maybe we've already answered this question, but it's kind of the last question I want to revisit in all of this is, I am so taken by the fact that Katie did run with that information from Gretchen to Kiki. And apparently now there's another blogger, I saw this last night in my research, who's come out being like, Katie also told me this about Gretchen being roofied. And this,
of course she did.
And this blogger was also like, she also said a lot of other dark stuff that they didn't go into. So I am curious, given that Gretchen was an ally of Katie's, do you have any hit as to like, because like, Gina, I understand punishing her. Emily, I understand punishing her. I understand punishing Heather. But if Gretchen's an ally, do you have any sense of what would motivate Katie to spread this private information amongst the bloggers?
I don't think Katie has allies. I think that she's still addicted to the cycle of survival. So I don't think that she believes in any of these women ever being an ally. And I think it goes back to the deep, 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 deep Three of Swords hurt of when she was truthful with friends at a young age, and that became like a huge source of pain for her. I don't think she believes, possibly, maybe she doesn't even trust white women, which I wouldn't blame her for, right? Like there could just be also like, I don't think that she believes in having allies in any of these women. And I think that's actually the spot where Gina's probably sort of seeing too. There is no real intimacy between her and any of the other women. The only intimacy she gives us is in the testimonials.
It's so interesting. Yeah, this notion of truth wielded as a weapon. Because, you know, when we were first talking about this, like the idea of like getting in trouble for telling the truth, the way that I kind of first saw it was, I speak the truth out loud, I get punished for it, which I'm sure played a part. But then when you were just speaking, what I also got was, I trust this friend. I confide something to them. They then run around with it and spread it like wildfire, and it's used against me.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, it just comes back to information's power. Information is currency. Information's a weapon.
She's filming. She has no desire to build trust. She doesn't believe that she could trust any of these people. I don't think that's in her ability to believe that there's a real relationship to be had with any of these people. It's all transactional alliances to get the motive across, or just to stay, in her case, to survive on the show.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of like what I'd conclude with. I mean, I basically already said it, but like, yeah, I was really sitting with like, why is this showing up in Orange County right now? You know, but it's true. It's like, as we head into our 20th season and we're back with this show, the franchise that started it all, it really kind of does feel like kind of Katie came in as this unintentionally mischievous little fire starter who's kind of holding up the mirror to say like, what has this show become? Like, it's about alliances. Wow. It's about blogs. It's about gossip. It's about podcasts. I really believe that, I've kind of said this, because obviously the fourth wall has been broken down on these shows and it's gotten so meta. I really have a secret theory that I think two T's in a pod like really played a part in that, because that was kind of like a quietly watershed moment where we had two former housewives talking about the housewives from the behind the scenes perspective of housewives. And Teddy and Tamra really kind of brought to the forefront this conversation of what makes a good housewife, the housewife who's willing to move story forward, the line a housewife is walking between like being authentic and like being good for the show. So I guess I'm just saying that because, again, it kind of all comes back to Orange County. So yeah, I think Katie's kind of maybe here just to kind of hold up that mirror and say, what is this? Like, it's almost like a distorted, exaggerated version. And just, again, the fact that like all of her conflict, Molly, all of her conflict is stuff that happens off camera. And it's just this.
Well, yeah, you're totally right. And I think that as you were just talking now, I actually, because two T's in a pod, it's like, I actually think that's a very real relationship, Teddy and Tamra. Like that's like the most truest relationship in Tamra's life. But they also are like the arbiters of right or wrong. And I think Katie really just is like against that. And I think this could be harsh, but I actually think that every single woman on this show of OC is like a representation and a symbol of all the women that have hurt Katie. And I actually think that she's like subconsciously like on the show to try and like poke all of them. That sounds, and I'm not even wronging her for that. I'm not even like making her wrong for that, because I do think it's just like there are a lot of harmful white women out there in the world who do need to be poked at a little bit. And I do think that there's, not to say like it's a race thing. I'm just saying like that I think it's subconscious. I think it's subconscious, but I don't think that Katie trusts any of these women. I don't think she should, but I think her motives are probably even unconscious to her, that she literally wants to get back at every person who hurt her that these women happen to represent. That's just my take. I could be wrong.
It's just so interesting because even when you talk about trust, it's like what I just suddenly felt is like trust is limited in this world. And it's sort of like I do think there are real friendships and I think they have real feelings for each other.
Yes.
But within the context of the show, they're also playing a game. And like we're saying, they're playing to win. And I can just feel how it's like, I can trust you as far as I can throw you, or I can trust you as you're as good as yesterday's act of solidarity. And you're as bad as yesterday's betrayal. There's a bit of a like improv that they're doing where they kind of need each other, but also suspect each other. And everyone's kind of like got their toes in the water to check the temperature of like, how much can I trust you? And there's only so much they're going to call it out in one another because, like I was saying before, they need allies. So if you rock the boat too much with confronting someone, you lose an ally and you could end up in a corner all alone, so it's
right. Well,
and I think Katie's,
and that's what reality TV did.
Right. And I think Katie is really, when they say, Katie, we can't trust you, we can't trust you, we can't trust you. Again, I think Katie is kind of holding up this larger than life exaggerated version of the distrust they already feel amongst one another, and I think
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And I think that's where a lot of the heat comes from of like, much in the same way that Katie has her own disowned rage. And you spoke to this. It's like their disowned rage is coming out towards Katie of like the position they're in. So when Emily is like screaming at her, I think it's because on some level she's sort of navigating where she has abandoned her own principles, where she is playing this game, you know what I mean? Where I'm sure it gets exhausting to play this game, where I'm telling myself a story in my head about why it's okay for me to play the game, but not someone else. And maybe Katie is like holding up that mirror and I don't like what I'm seeing. So it's much easier for me to point the finger back at Katie than it is for me to say, well, isn't it interesting that I did say kids are off limits and then I went to this reunion and I was talking about her kids? Maybe I need to look at that. Which, by the way, with Heather, it's always so hard because she's such a control freak. And this could just be political for the show, but I kind of see Heather doing that this season. Like I've just noticed Heather definitely, she seems a lot gentler with Katie this season. I don't know. I've really noticed Heather this season. It's like, it does feel like she kind of learned something last season. Again, whether she actually learned it or it's kind of about maneuvering within the show, I'm not quite sure. But it does seem like she witnessed something and is taking it in.
Yeah, and she's also, reevaluating her relationship with Tamara, which I think is healthy. And I just want to be clear. I do believe there are real relationships between these women. I'm saying I don't think Katie believes that they're real.
Oh, no. I get that.
From the context of how Katie from the context of how Katie views relationships, they're not real. From the context of how these women are in relation to each other, they are real. And what's being poked at is, are they real? Right. And so then it brings me back to end here, but it brings me back to the Trump stuff started with him being on a reality TV star, and reality TV is when the world prior to reality TV was like, there was a bad guy, there was a good guy. Reality TV came on the scene, and it's like, there's a lot of good guys and bad guys, and they seem to flip roles all the time. And that's where our whole society started to change, where we started to look at, and then we became obsessed with, Breaking Bad anti-heroes. We became obsessed with our own shadow once we started looking at reality TV. And once we started seeing that every single human on reality TV is very complex. And any one given day, they could be the villain. And then the next given day, they could be the hero, because it's not black and white like storytelling was, with just archetypes being one archetype. We take a look at each other, and like the Jewish face says, you look at one person and they're the whole universe. I look at the tarot deck. The tarot deck is the entire universe represented in all the cards, and each one of us has a representation of each card within us. And so this is really fascinating, right? Like this whole how Trump was a reality TV star, and it's now is sitting in the White House, and how we are saying, oh, we're so polarized because of this person. And it's like, well, it really did start in, I don't know when reality TV started, like in the 90s maybe, but it started when we started to have a mirror. I love that you're talking about mirrors, because that's what happened is when somebody gives us a mirror, we are faced with more work to do than we're probably equipped for.
Yeah, and I like that you are, I got it, but I like that you are kind of like reiterating that there is a way in which these relationships are real. Because I do see people online saying things like, well, none of them have real relationships and they're all just allies. And because, people are kind of saying, the double standard with Katie. And I do understand the voice that says, Katie has no history with these women. She doesn't have real relationships with them. So yes, some of her maneuvering is going to land differently within the group. Even like by contrast, someone like Jen, I saw Gina make this point recently. I think it's a really good point. I think Jen did a great job of coming on the show and actually wanting to cultivate real relationships, right? Like that is an option. And I do think it's important to say that, like, look, are there alliances? Yep. Yes. Are they coworkers? Yes. Is there strategy involved with these relationships? 100%. But Tamara and Shannon had a real 10-year relationship. The Tres Amigas, like Vicky.
Red Day.
Vicky and Tamara, exactly. Vicky and Tamara had a real friendship. I believe Gina and Emily are genuinely close. Even a friendship like Heather and Tamara, while do I think they'd ever be friends for a moment if it weren't for the show? No. But do I think they have, like you're saying, do I think they have genuine affection for one another based on their time on the show? 100%. And by the way, Tamara did hang out with Heather, like after Heather got fired. Like they maintained that relationship. So I do think the relationships are real. And to the point that we're making, what I think Katie is holding up a mirror to in her own unconscious, exaggerated way are the places where the relationship veers out of genuine connection, fondness for one another into, just loyalty for the sake of loyalty, backing each other's lies, using each other as allies. Like it's a blend. And I think Katie is shining a light on something. And I think it's uncomfortable for them, in addition to they're being betrayed by her. You know what I mean? So it's everything all at once. Well, she's going to have to take some risks, if she were to really accept if she were really to accept the invitation of the show, she would essentially have to do what the other women are asking her to do, which is to kind of come clean and just be like, these are all the things I did and why. Now, again, it's a risk for Katie because her learned experience is this will be used against me. This will be another instance of someone putting me in a box. And then when I acknowledge I'm in the box, they're going to be like, see, you're in the fucking box. But that's going to be so coming back to your question, that would be the work for Katie of acknowledging what she did. And then if someone like Emily is raging at her, that she has the capacity and the right to say, Emily, like, I hear this is taking you into feelings. I'm willing to be in that conversation with you. And you can't talk to me this way. And this rage is not for me, it's for you. And I'm not going to be your punching bag. You know what I mean? So there is a balance here, but it's kind of like you were talking about, like the truth needs to be seen and heard by others. You know, for Katie and for all of us, when we drop this desire to win, it's about like, you got to know the truth for yourself. And you got to understand you're not always going to be seen and heard there. You're going to be misunderstood.
Exactly.
It's
a tough one.
Yeah, seeing it and knowing it for yourself, that's kind of like the biggest invitation for us all. I will say, as someone who like early in life was projected on a lot, was misunderstood a lot, who had so much rage around the ways in which I was not seen, not heard, and misunderstood. And as someone who learned to cultivate an inner knowing in what's true for me, I will say it does get easier. And there's actually something for me, just to get personal for a moment, that is actually so beautiful about that place. Like when I can kind of look someone in the eye who's like not seeing me, not hearing me, telling me things about me that aren't true.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just kind of stay present inside myself and essentially say, what you're saying isn't true for me. And to like not need them to know anything else and to not get into their level of like, well, you do this and you do that. It is one of the most empowering things that I've ever experienced.
Wow. What you just said actually healed something in me that needed to be. I needed you to explain it exactly the way you just did just now. And I think that that's going to be not just me, but a lot of people. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, then I will take that as my cue that our work is done. This was deep.
Yeah, we went there. Thank you, Katie.
I know, seriously. Thank you, Katie. I mean, it would just be, you know, I always say this, it would be so fascinating to be able to do like a 5-day workshop, like with one of these casts and just
oh my God,
support
that would be
them.
Incredible. Film that, please.
Well, yeah, of course.
Or maybe you're not meant to.
No.
But yeah.
No. And, you know, the last thing I do want to say, not that we need to get into all this, but I do want to say it just because like I see a lot of talk about this online. I do want to say I do really believe that Tamra is deeply struggling with Teddy's illness. And I think that that's really real. And I do think she really cares. Now, you know, does it get used in certain ways? Sure, that's what Tamra does. But I think that's real. And I just want to say that.
Yes, Jamie. It's just tricky, you know, when she's like, nobody called me. And Heather's like, I called you.
No, I know.
Times.
Yeah, no, look. I want to be clear about something. When I say I have a soft spot for Tamra, I'm not saying I do not see who she is. Look.
Okay, I get it. Yeah,
I see who she is. I see who all they are. Anyone who I have a soft spot for, I see who they are. There's no rose-colored.
You have radical acceptance. Yeah.
Of some of them. And then I get triggered by others. And that's the thing, right? It's like we all have the people that we get triggered by, and we all have the people that we strangely have a weird soft spot for. You know, it's like.
I will say this too, Jamie. She reminds me of somebody extremely close to me who I love very deeply, who I will never be able to get accountability from. So for me, when I am in radical acceptance of Tamra, I will have healed something in my life. Just like I used to get triggered by Shannon. Now I find her entertaining. So, you know, that's why I think these shows are fascinating and actually kind of helpful.
No, for sure. I mean, I've often thought that sometimes some of the people I have a soft spot for, like a Vicky, less of a soft spot for her now, but historically I had a soft spot for her. But like Vicky and Tamra, is that because I don't know them personally and they're like characters on a TV screen, it sort of allows me to love that personality type who I also have had a lot of experience with. It allows me to kind of love them from afar. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of 100%. Like
100%. That's what I'm working on with Tamra. And I am not kidding you. That is literally what I'm working on with her. If I can love Tamra, I'll know that a part of me is healed.
But it is interesting, right? I mean, it is so interesting to look at. Like for me, it's like, why? Because that's the thing. Like when I see Tamra up to her tricks,
Yes.
I mean, you're hearing me laugh. Like I just sort of, it amuses me for some reason. I'm like, oh, there goes Tamra. But like, why do I have that response to Tamra? Shannon, on the other hand, well, actually, I know I actually can answer this question for myself. But, it's just, I'm putting this question out there for people to think about it for themselves. Like, why is it that someone like Shannon, I would see her antics and be like, ugh, like, get the fuck off my screen. It's like, it's just so interesting to think about, like, why do certain personalities have these, like, impact on us and not others,
Yeah. And I think that we all are, it's like going back to the mirrors and the universal aspects of us all having all of these traits. And that's why your work is in particularly, that's why so many people tune into this, your podcast, because like, and I've asked people back home, like, oh, why do you like reality TV? It's like, well, because it's like, it helps me not think about my life while also processing my life with all these personalities.
Yeah. And that was like, way back when, like, that's kind of what the real world started. It's like people seeing themselves on TV.
Yeah. and is that good for us or is it confronting, right?
Well, I think we're just now hopefully entering the next stage, which I guess is part of what I'm doing with this podcast of like, can we now take this to a deeper level of consciousness? And I think the world is ready for that. All right, Molly, we went to the deepest realms. We came back out. I'm always so grateful just for your insight and your energy and your willingness. Tell people where they should find you.
At Molly Durand on Instagram or mollydurandmusic.com. Got some new songs coming out. Life is beautiful. That's what I got. That's what I got for you.
All right, guys. And you can follow me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN, where there is exclusive content. And actually now more than ever, I'm rolling out some new types of content. And if you're curious about my work, head over to my website, hollywoodreadings.com. Send me an email if you'd like. And we will be back soon. See you on the flip side. Bye.